Chapter 804. A key. Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean? Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian. Do you know what was Master's previous identity? The Master of the Prison Pagoda. Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Lian Qian said, Master was once known as a prophet in the fifth dimension. Even the masters of the fifth dimension had to kneel and pay respect to Master. Yi Xian frowned. Pay respect to Master? Lian Qian nodded, a trace of worship in her eyes. You can't imagine how respected Master was in the fifth dimension. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Miss Lian Qian, don't tell me that your master was framed, died, and then escaped from the prison pagoda. This is too melodramatic. Lian Qian shook her head. If Master didn't want to die, no one could kill him. Even if the undying giants of the fifth dimension joined hands, they still couldn't kill Master. As for why Master disappeared, us sisters don't know. We only know that he disappeared very suddenly, and 100 years after he disappeared, the people of the fifth dimension began to covet the treasures he left behind. Yi Xian asked, Prison pagoda? Lian Qian said in a deep voice, Not only the prison pagoda, what those people really care about is the universal library that Master created. Yi Xian frowned. Universal library? A bookstore? Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian. That is not a simple bookstore. Master's understanding of the universe is unparalleled in the entire fifth dimension. And in this study room, there were many of his writings and notes. These things were not something that any martial path mystic art could compare to. In addition, in this bookstore, there are some things that Master created. Saying this, Lian Qian slightly paused, then continued, Our Tao laws were created by Master. This Xiao Ta is the same. And we are just one of the creatures he created. Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, he suddenly realized that the Master of the prison pagoda was a bit incredible. If what Lian Qian said was true, then the Master of the prison pagoda could really be called a god. In his heart, perhaps the real god was like this. Lian Qian glanced at Yi Xian. Master had no interest in power or longevity. He spent his entire life pursuing the true meaning of the universe and the origin of life. Before he disappeared, no one dared to be disrespectful to him. Even the masters of the fifth dimension had to be respectful when they came to our place. But after he disappeared, these people started to covet the world-dimensional bookstore that he left behind. And in order to enter the myriad-dimensional bookhouse, one must have this Xiao Ta. Without this Xiao Ta, no one can enter. This is because the myriad-dimensional bookhouse has a restriction that the owner left behind. And that restriction, even after several tens of thousands of years, no one can harm it in the slightest. Yi Xian said solemnly, What kind of books are there in this universal library? Lian Qian said softly, I don't know much because I was very playful when I was young and didn't care about these things. It was only after I grew up that I realized what I missed out on. Speaking up to this point, her expression became somewhat bitter. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Then why did he disappear? Lian Qian shook her head. I don't know. However, I can be sure that in the fifth dimension, no one can kill Master. Even the Master of the three swords at the top of the pagoda can't kill Master. Of course, if Master wants to kill those three, I'm afraid it will be difficult. In any case, I can't say for sure because I'm not very clear about the true strength of the Master of the three swords at the top of the pagoda. Moreover, I'm not very clear about Master's strength because I haven't seen him fight. I only know that even the masters of the fifth dimension were very respectful in front of Master. They didn't even dare to speak loudly. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. Master definitely won't die. Unless he wants to die. The Master of the three swords at the top of the pagoda. Yi Xian had the most contact with the plain-dressed woman. How strong was she? He didn't even have an idea. Did he think that she could kill anyone with one sword? At this time, Lian Qian suddenly said, I only know that before Master disappeared, he was studying the path of reincarnation. Reincarnation? Yi Xian looked at Lian Qian. What do you mean? Lian Qian said in a deep voice, Master liked to study. Before he disappeared, I remember he was studying the path of reincarnation. Moreover, he wrote 2 books about reincarnation. I think they were called Reincarnation and Cause and Effect, and Past Life and Present Life. However, before he finished writing them, he disappeared. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, After he disappeared, didn't you go to his study room to take a look? Lian Qian shook her head. We couldn't go in. Only this Xiao Ta could go in. And this broken pagoda, at that time, was leading us around blindly. In fact, the real reason was that we thought Master would come back soon. However, we didn't expect that he would disappear completely. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he said, in other words, this broken pagoda is also very, very precious in the fifth dimension, right? Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian. In the fifth dimension, there is nothing that can compare with Master's Universal Library. There are rumors in the fifth dimension that inside Master's Universal Library, there is the true meaning of the universe, the true meaning of life, the end of the martial path. Yi Xian spread his hands. Then the only way to enter is in my hands, right? Lian Qian nodded. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Miss Lian Qian, I really don't understand why this pagoda would come to the fourth dimension. Moreover, it just happened to fall into my hands. Is this just a coincidence? Lian Qian was silent. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Tell me your opinion. Lian Qian said softly. It might not be a coincidence. Yi Xian asked. Why? Lian Qian said, when those people wanted to make a move on Master's Universal Library, we let this Xiao Ta escape. It also knows how to escape. It is basically impossible for others to come to the fourth dimension, but this broken pagoda can travel between the fourth and fifth dimensions at will. Yi Xian asked again, why? Lian Qian said, because the restriction between the fifth dimension and the fourth dimension was set by Master. And this broken pagoda is not only the key to the Universal Library, but also the key to the fifth dimension. Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Xian. The reason why that plain-dressed woman didn't barge into the fifth dimension is because if she did, she would have to face the power set by Master. And at that time you will be in the most danger. That should be what she's worried about. Yi Xian thought about it and said, actually, I can use this pagoda to bring her into the fifth dimension. And then, Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian. She will definitely have no problem going into the fifth dimension. What about you? Will it be a problem for you? Or do you want her to protect you for a lifetime? To stay by your side every single day? Yi Xian went silent. Lian Qian said, compared to the fifth dimension, the fourth dimension is safer for you, isn't it? Yi Xian said in a low voice, but the fifth dimension has already started to act against me. Lian Qian went silent for a moment and said, like what the eighth poster said, the plain-dressed woman might have encountered something. Speaking of this, she raised her head and looked at the boundless horizon. There was a trace of confusion in her eyes. Things are getting worse. A moment later, Yi Xian said in a low voice, let's not worry about the fifth dimension for now. We have to deal with the Sword Sect first. The Sword Sect. The Sword Sect had their eyes on him now, and Ji Jing was definitely not the last one. Yi Xian left the prison pagoda and called 7th, and Lanqiu, Mo Xia, Chao Tianer, and Guan Jun to the hall. It could be said that the people in the hall were currently the most powerful people in the northern region. Yi Xian looked at them. Is there anything you want to say? Chao Tianer suddenly said, you can't stay in the northern region. Everyone looked at Chao Tianer. Chao Tianer said, their target is you. If you stay in the northern region, they will come again. The northern region won't be able to take it. No, the entire Shenhuang Great World won't be able to take it. Yi Xian nodded. I know. The battle from before had nearly destroyed the entire Tianjiang city. At this moment 7th suddenly said, if we leave, where will we go? Yi Xian smiled, the dual world sky. Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood up and said softly, I want to make the waters even more chaotic. Even though the Sword Sect is strong, they aren't invincible. Only by going to the dual world sky can I make the waters even more chaotic and take advantage of the situation. 7th said solemnly, will they use the northern region to threaten you? Everyone fell silent when they heard this. If the Sword Sect used the northern region to threaten Yi Xian, then Yi Xian would have no choice but to return. Yi Xian said, I don't have a choice. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked to the entrance of the hall and said, I must go to the dual world sky and use the pagoda of prison to throw the various powers in the fourth dimension into chaos. Because only there are experts in the dual world sky who might be able to resist the Sword Sect. 7th said solemnly, we'll go with you. Yi Xian smiled. It's just right for me to draw their attention by myself. Moreover, I can escape. He had the boundless sword. It could be said that so long as he wanted to escape, then even an expert like Zijing couldn't kill him by himself. And Lanqiu suddenly asked, what about the Xianhuang Great World? Yi Xian said softly, I'll draw their attention. So long as there's sufficient firepower, then they won't care about the Xianhuang Great World. And Lanqiu's beautiful brows knit together slightly. That's too dangerous. Mo Xian nodded slightly. It's dangerous. Yi Xian smiled. It's just as dangerous if I stay here, isn't it? Seventh suddenly said, I'll go with you to draw their attention. Yi Xian shook his head. We need you here. Just as he'd said, the northern region needed experts to hold down the fort. Only when Lanqiu and the others were here would he be able to leave at ease. Otherwise, he wouldn't even dare to leave the northern region. Meanwhile, Chao Tian'er suddenly said, How are you going to draw their attention? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth raised slightly. Their target is the pagoda of prison. Only the pagoda can draw their attention. When he spoke up to hear, his smile grew brighter. I'll auction the pagoda of prison. Everyone. P.S. Today is the 1st, so everyone will definitely have a lot of monthly votes. Does anyone want to vote for me? Chapter 805. Auctioning the Prison Pagoda. In the hall, everyone's expression became strange. Xueqi suddenly said, Can we still use this move? Yi Xian said with a smile, Why not? Xueqi shook his head. Those people aren't stupid. You've already auctioned it once, and now it's back in your hands. Think about it. Yi Xian smiled. I'm not the one auctioning it. Xueqi looked at Yi Xian. You mean to let Senior Sword Venerable auction it? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Hearing this, everyone understood. If Yi Xian auctioned it, those experts definitely wouldn't fall for it. They might even hate Yi Xian. One must know that Yi Xian had auctioned it once before, and now the prison pagoda was back in his hands and he was auctioning it again. Was he putting on a show? Therefore, if Yi Xian auctioned it again, he would definitely become the target of everyone. But if Sword Venerable auctioned it, the situation would be different. At this moment, Chao Tian'er suddenly said, This plan is feasible. But, saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. There's a prerequisite. That is, the sword sect can't kill you instantly. Also, the experts of the dual world sky don't fear the sword sect. They dare to go against the sword sect. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. So we have to gamble. Gamble. Hearing Yi Xian's words, everyone's expression darkened. Obviously, Yi Xian wasn't absolutely confident. Yi Xian smiled. Don't underestimate the charm of this pagoda. This is something that can lead to the 5th dimension. Many people will be tempted. Moreover, I believe that in the 4th dimension, the sword sect is definitely not the strongest. Everyone fell silent. At this moment, Chao Tian'er suddenly said, I'll go with you. Yi Xian was about to speak, but Chao Tian'er said, Afraid that I'll drag you down? Yi Xian shook his head. Of course not, but, and Lanqiu suddenly said, Let Miss Chao go with you. 7 nodded. Let her go with you, we will guard this place. The reason why they allowed Chao Tian'er to follow Yi Xian was not only because Chao Tian'er was strong, but also because Chao Tian'er was very smart and could give Yi Xian advice. Yi Xian was very impulsive at times. Seeing that everyone agreed, Yi Xian did not insist. He looked at Chao Tian'er and said, All right, shall we set off tomorrow? Chao Tian'er frowned. Tomorrow? Do you think the sword sect will give you that much time? Aren't you thinking too much? Saying that, she walked to Yi Xian and said, We have to set off now, because if I'm not wrong, the people from the sword sect are already on their way. We must arrive at the dual realm sky before they reach the northern region, and then use the prison pagoda to attract them. Otherwise, the Xianhuang Great World is likely to face a great disaster. Yi Xian was about to speak, but Chao Tian'er said, I know you want to say goodbye, but we don't have much time now. There's still a long way to go. Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. All right. Saying that, he looked at 7 and the others. I'll leave the northern region to you. Saying that, he flicked his finger and a white jade bottle appeared in front of Lanqiu and the others. Spring of Life. Guanjun also had one. Yi Xian said, This thing should be helpful to you. Lanqiu looked at Yi Xian and said, Be careful. Yi Xian smiled and said, I will be very careful because I don't want to die. Lanqiu nodded slightly. We'll wait for your return. Yi Xian nodded. All of you have to be careful as well. Let me know if there's anything. Saying that, he looked at Guanjun and said, Senior Guanjun, if you want to leave, you can do so at any time. You've helped us enough. You don't owe us anything. Guanjun glanced at the spring of life and shook his head with a smile. I have nowhere to go anyway. Yi Xian said seriously, Thank you very much. Guanjun nodded slightly. The dual realm sky is filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Don't be careless. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Saying that, he looked at everyone and said, Take care. Saying that, he disappeared from the hall with Chao Tian'er. He didn't bid farewell to Yiling. Just as Chao Tian'er said, now wasn't the time to be wishy-washy. There's still a long way to go. Soon, the two of them arrived in the vast starry sky. Destination: Dual Realm Sky. On the way, Chao Tian'er suddenly said, Is the sword sect's target only the World Prison Pagoda? Yi Xian looked at Chao Tian'er and said with a smile, What do you mean? Chao Tian'er said softly, The feeling they give me is that they don't only want the pagoda, but also you. Yi Xian nodded. Indeed, they don't only want the pagoda. Chao Tian'er's face sank. Then this matter won't be so easy to deal with. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian and said, Why do they want to target you? Yi Xian shook his head. This was also what he wanted to know. The sword sect. In fact, he had a deep relationship with the sword sect. Along the way, he had encountered several sword sect, especially when he was the sect leader of one of the sword sect. In all fairness, he did not want to become enemies with the sword sect. However, he was also very clear that although these sword sect had a deep relationship with each other, they had their own way of doing things. To put it simply, some sword sect might be his friend, but some sword sect might be his enemy. Of course, he was also curious about how many sword sect there were. And the founder of these sword sect was the same person. Yi Xian shook his head. No matter what, this sword sect was definitely an enemy. Chao Tian'er suddenly said, What we need to do now is to find out the real strength of this sword sect. Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. I'll contact the temple. Saying that, he took out a voice transmission stone and a moment later, a voice came from the stone. What is it? Zhu Xie's voice. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Zhu, I thought you wouldn't accept it. Zhu Xie said indifferently. If you have something to say, then say it. Yi Xian did not joke around and said seriously, Miss Zhu, I already know the origins of those who chased after me. They are all from a force called the Sword Sect, and this force is in some sword ruins world. Does the temple know about them? After a moment of silence, Zhu Xie said, We have also just found out a little bit. This organization is extremely mysterious, and they have never appeared in the fourth dimension before. At least, they have not appeared in the past 10,000 years. But 10,000 years ago, they appeared once, and at that time, they seemed to be looking for someone. After that, they did not appear again. At this point, she paused and then said, You must be extremely careful. Although this force rarely appears in the eyes of the world, their strength is definitely very, very terrifying. And they still dared to come after you even after knowing that plain-dressed woman is behind you. This is enough to prove that they are not afraid of the plain-dressed woman behind you. At this time, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. It might not be because they are not afraid, but it might be because they are ignorant. Ignorant. Lian Qian's strength might not be especially strong, but her knowledge was not something an ordinary person could compare to. She knew how strong the experts of the fifth dimension were. Therefore, she compared the plain-clothed woman to them. In the end, even if the plain-clothed woman reached the fifth dimension, she would still be at the peak. Perhaps, only the legendary ancient existences of the fifth dimension would be able to contend against her. And in the fourth dimension, the only ones who could fight against the plain-dressed woman were the owners of the other two swords. But from the looks of it, those two swords were also inextricably linked to Yi Xian. At this time, Zhu Xie's voice sounded in front of Yi Xian's voice again. As for other information about this sword sect, we are still investigating. If there is any, I will inform you. Yi Xian said solemnly. Many thanks. Zhu Xie did not say anything else. Yi Xian kept the voice transmission stone and looked up at the end of the starry sky. The road ahead is not going to be easy. Chao Tian'er looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled slightly. But I have no choice. Miss Chao, let's go. Soon, The two disappeared into the boundless starry sky. Dual Realm Sky. The closer they got to Dual Realm Sky, the closer Yixian knew he was to the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension. Actually, he was also very curious about the fifth dimension. After all, it was a world higher than the fourth dimension. He also wanted to see what kind of world it was. Of course, he did not want to go there. He really did not want to live a life of being hunted. 2 days later, Yixian and Qiao Tian'er were getting closer to Dual Realm Sky. During this time, the two did not encounter any threats. No one from the sword sect came to stop them. But because of this, the two were even more cautious. On the way, Qiao Tian'er suddenly said, "We can ask Temple to help us release the news." Yixian looked at Qiao Tian'er. "Auction the World Prison Pagoda?" Qiao Tian'er. Yixian hesitated, then said, "Isn't it too early?" Qiao Tian'er shook her head. "Don't underestimate the experts in the Dual Realm Sky. If I'm not wrong, they already know you're here, but they may not know why you're here. So, we have to let them know now. Only then will they temporarily give up on targeting you." Yixian thought about it, then nodded, "Okay." Then, he took out the voice transmission stone and sent a message to Xueqi. Xueqi did not reject this favor and agreed immediately. Soon, the news that Yixian had come to Dual Realm Sky to auction the fifth dimension treasure spread quickly. Of course, Temple said that Venerable Sword would be selling it, while Yixian was only there to help. Many people knew that with Yixian's arrival, Dual Realm Sky would not be peaceful anymore. In an unknown star region, two women were slowly walking. The two of them were walking very quickly. During this time, the two of them had passed through countless mysterious black holes. One of them was Al Yen. Finally, after passing through one of the black holes, the woman next to Al Yen stopped and looked into the distance. "We're almost there." Just as Elaine was about to speak, a white furry little fellow was waving her claws in a rhythmic manner as if she was practicing martial arts. At the same time she was humming, "Huh, humph, 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 humph." The woman next to Al Yen smiled. "She's practicing a martial arts from Lian Shuang's hometown. I forgot what it's called." "Martial arts?" Al Yen looked at the woman next to her. "What martial arts?" The woman smiled. "Lian Shuang's hometown. She's very obsessed with it." "Lian Shuang." Al Yen shook her head and smiled. She looked at the little fellow in the distance, and the little fellow looked at her as well. In the next moment, the little fellow's eyes lit up, and then she flew towards Al Yen. In next to no time, the little fellow flew over to Al Yen, and then she rubbed her forehead against Al Yen's chin intimately. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded behind Al Yen. "You're here." Hearing this, Al Yen's body trembled slightly. Chapter 806. The Dual Realm Sky. The Dual Realm Sky was a world created by countless experts. More accurately, it was a passageway that led to the fifth dimension. In order to open this passageway, the Dual Realm Sky had sacrificed generations of experts. Thus, the Dual Realm Sky was also known as the Dual Realm Graveyard. This was the final resting place of countless experts in the fourth dimension. Many experts from the fourth dimension eventually reached this place and fell here. Generation after generation of experts repeated this cycle, falling into an endless cycle. Until now, no one had reached the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension. This was the hope of countless experts, but it was also this place that made them despair. Over the years, how many amazing people had ended up turning into dust after coming to this place? And now, a treasure from the fifth dimension had appeared in the fourth dimension. The Prison Pagoda. With this item, one could easily enter the fifth dimension. These experts, who were already on the verge of despair, could not help but have a spark of hope ignite in their hearts. Without external items? Using one's own strength to enter the fifth dimension? Only those who had not experienced despair would think this way. For many experts who had experienced despair, the Prison Pagoda was their last hope. The appearance of the Prison Pagoda was like a drowning man seeing a piece of driftwood. Moreover, this Prison Pagoda came from the fifth dimension. It was also the only way for experts from the fourth dimension to understand the fifth dimension. Somewhere in the clouds, Yixian and Qiao Tian'er were walking slowly. Not far in front of them, about 1,000 zhong away, there was an illusory door. The gate of the Dual Realm. After passing through this door, one would arrive at the Dual Realm Sky. The threshold for this door was very high. One had to be at least an earth immortal to enter. But recently, this door had been opened wide. Next to Yi Xian, Chao Tian said softly, "It seems that the experts of the dual realm sky welcome you." Yi Xian smiled. "I did not come empty-handed." Chao Tian looked at Yi Xian. "Once you enter this door, you will either live or die. Have you thought it through?" Yi Xian stopped and asked, "What if I don't enter this door?" Chao Tian smiled. "Still the same." Yi Xian rolled his eyes. "Then why did you ask?" Chao Tian sized up Yi Xian with a complicated look in her eyes. "Do you want to hear what I think of you?" Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Chao Tian said, "Ever since I started investigating you, I discovered something very interesting." Yi Xian was a little curious. "What interesting thing?" Chao Tian said, "Your entire life has been spent either in battle or on the path to battle." Yi Xian was speechless. Chao Tian suddenly shook her head and smiled. "You've been living a hard life." Yi Xian sighed softly. "Isn't it tough?" "I was almost killed by you back then." Chao Tian smiled. "You don't hate me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course I hated you at first, but now you are my friend, right?" "Friends?" Chao Tian smiled. "Friends?" Yi Xian asked. "Aren't we?" Chao Tian looked at Yi Xian. "In this world, the people who can defeat you are often your closest people and your friends." Yi Xian said with a smile. "But in this world, the people who can motivate and help you are usually the people closest to you and your friends, aren't they?" Chao Tian smiled. "You have a good mentality." As they spoke, the two arrived in front of the heavenly gate. Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Chao, if you leave now, you might still be able to make it." Chao Tian glanced at Yi Xian. "Are you going to stir up some feelings for me now?" Yi Xian laughed and then walked into the two-realm gate with Chao Tian. No one stopped them. Soon, the two appeared in a spatial tunnel, the end of which could not be seen. Behind them, the two-realm gate was closed. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of the two. The old man was thin and could be described as skinny. His back was slightly hunched and his eyes were somewhat gloomy. He did not give off a good feeling. The old man stared at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, "Senior, you are?" The old man said in a hoarse voice, "Can you let me see the fifth-dimensional treasure? I will just take a look. I will definitely not snatch it." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Of course." As soon as he finished speaking, Sword Venerable appeared beside him. Sword Venerable looked at the old man and said, "You want to see?" The old man looked at Sword Venerable and grinned, revealing his yellow teeth. "Sword Venerable, I am not afraid of you." As soon as he finished speaking, Sword Venerable suddenly attacked. A cold light arrived first. The old man suddenly clenched his right hand lightly, and with this clench, he directly grasped that wisp of sword light. However, at this moment, another sword light slashed over. The old man held the sword light and blasted it forward. Boom! The sword light exploded. Sword Venerable and the old man both retreated 10 feet. The yellow-toothed old man looked at Sword Venerable and smiled sinisterly. "Sword Venerable, you don't seem to have made any progress." Sword Venerable was expressionless. "Yellow-toothed old man, after we leave, shall we fight to the death?" "Fight to the death." The yellow-toothed old man slowly clenched his right hand. "Sword Venerable, my goal is only that fifth-dimensional treasure." Sword Venerable looked at the yellow-toothed old man. "Do you have the ability to take it?" The yellow-toothed old man narrowed his eyes and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "You just want to see?" The yellow-toothed old man looked at Yi Xian. "Can I?" Yi Xian smiled. "Of course I can." As he said this, he looked at Sword Venerable. The woman quickly walked up to Yi Xian and Chao Tian and smiled. "Gentlemen, let me introduce myself. I am Shi Ziqing, a businessman." "A businessman?" Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Shi, are you here to buy a pagoda?" Shi Ziqing shook her head and smiled. "Emperor Yi, you must be joking. How can we afford such a divine item? This time, I came to look for King Yi because I want to do business with him." Yi Xian asked, "What business?" Shi Ziqing smiled. "Isn't Emperor Yi going to auction that divine item?" We happen to have a place, and we can also organize a large auction for Emperor Yi. After all, auctioning such a divine item requires a large venue. Apart from that, we can also provide some help to Emperor Yi within our capabilities. For example, Emperor Yi has just arrived here and is not familiar with this place. We can help Emperor Yi quickly understand this place. I think this is what Emperor Yi needs right now. Yi Xian nodded. What you say makes sense. What do I have to pay? Shi Ziqing smiled. Emperor Yi, shall we enter the city to discuss in detail? Yi Xian nodded. All right. Shi Ziqing looked around and cupped her fists. Everyone, the dreamy cloud chamber of commerce has no other intentions. We simply want to cooperate with Emperor Yi and help him auction this item. I hope that everyone can give the dreamy cloud chamber of commerce some face. There was no response. Shi Ziqing smiled. Thank you very much. After saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. Emperor Yi, please. Yi Xian nodded. Just like that, Yi Xian and Qiao Tian walked into the city. The streets of the city were very deserted because there were only the three of them. Yi Xian asked, is there usually no one here? Shi Ziqing smiled. There are very few people because they are all very busy. Of course there are relatively more people now. However, none of them have shown themselves. Emperor Yi understands. Yi Xian smiled. Understood. After saying that, he paused. Which power is the strongest here now? Shi Ziqing thought for a moment, then said, it's hard to say. Moreover, to correct Emperor Yi, the people here basically fight alone. There are very few who join forces. Moreover, everyone's goal is the fifth dimension, so there are very few conflicts of interest. Of course, things are different now. As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian. Emperor Yi has a precious treasure and is the target of everyone's attention. Therefore, Emperor Yi must be mentally prepared. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Do you have tickets? Chapter 807. Mentally prepared. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I'm already mentally prepared. Before coming here, he understood what this trip entailed. This was like a sheep entering a pack of wolves. But he had no choice. Of course he could choose to escape. With the immeasurable sword, even the sword sect would find it difficult to find him. But the problem was that he could not escape. If these people couldn't find him, they would definitely target the people around him. At that time, these experts would not care about the pride of the strong. He could only attract their attention. Soon, the three arrived at the city center. In front of Yi Xian's group was a circular building. This building was like a circle, without a roof, and one could see the sky. On both sides, there were private rooms. Yi Xian glanced around. This place was very spacious. Coupled with the layout of the place, it was very suitable for holding an auction. Shi Ziqing smiled. King Yi, knowing that you were coming, we specially cleaned this place. Are you satisfied? Yi Xian looked at Shi Ziqing. Miss Shi, can your dreamy cloud commerce guarantee my safety? Shi Ziqing shook her head. Sorry, no. King Ye's situation is special, and this place is also very special. We cannot guarantee anyone's safety, including our own. Yi Xian asked softly, is it that dangerous? Shi Ziqing smiled. This is the safest place in the four-dimensional universe, but it is also the most dangerous place in the four-dimensional universe. King Yi, when are you planning to auction it? Yi Xian said with a smile. Can we promote it? Shi Ziqing said solemnly. As far as we know, those who should have come are already here. Now, everyone is waiting for you. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Shi, are you also waiting? Shi Ziqing looked at Yi Xian. King Yi, we want to know some things about Dao Yi, but we have no interest in this tower. Although this thing is good, it is not something that ordinary people can enjoy. Yi Xian nodded. 3 days. 3 days from now. How about it? Shi Ziqing hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right. We will fight for 3 days for King Yi, but we can only fight for 3 days, because I'm afraid many people can't wait any longer. Please forgive us, King Yi. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Thank you. He knew very well that there were many people paying attention to him. These people would not give him too much time. Shi Ziqing nodded slightly, then turned and left. Only Yi Xian and Qiao Tian'er were left. Qiao Tian'er looked at Yi Xian. The situation might be worse than we thought. Yi Xian smiled and said, I have already thought of the worst outcome. Qiao Tian'er fell silent. Yi Xian took out the transmission stone, which vibrated slightly. A moment later, Xueqi's voice sounded from the transmission stone. I've received news that the Sword Sect's people have arrived at the Dual Realm sky. Be careful. Here it comes. Yi Xian put away the prison pagoda and looked at Qiao Tian'er. Miss Qiao, remember, no matter what happens, don't interfere. He knew very well that the people he was about to face were not people Qiao Tian'er could fight against. If Qiao Tian'er made a move, she would die without a doubt. Qiao Tian'er was silent. Naturally, she understood this as well. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and took out a storage ring. This was the storage ring of the blood ancestor. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Qiao, you are very knowledgeable. Do you have a way to open this ring? Qiao Tian'er walked to Yi Xian and took the ring. After a moment she said softly, this storage ring has a restriction. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Qiao Tian'er studied it for a long time, then shook her head. I can't. Yi Xian was somewhat helpless. The blood ancestor's storage ring must have many good things, but he just couldn't open it. This made his heart itch. Qiao Tian'er returned the storage ring to Yi Xian. Why do you need 3 days? Yi Xian smiled and said, I want to delay it for a while. Qiao Tian'er looked at Yi Xian. Is there a way to contact the woman in the plain dress? In this situation, only the woman in the plain dress could help. Yi Xian shook his head. The woman in the plain dress? He hadn't seen her for a long time. Qiao Tian'er's face darkened. Yi Xian smiled and said, It's fine. We can't rely on her for everything, can we? Qiao Tian'er looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. Suddenly, she realized that Yi Xian was actually quite miserable. Not only were there more and more enemies, but they were also getting stronger. The enemies he was facing now were all peak experts in the 4-dimensional universe. In addition, the 5-dimensional universe was also eyeing him covetously. Qiao Tian'er shook her head. What did you do in your previous life? Yi Xian, Qiao Tian'er said, I'm going to familiarize myself with 2-realm city. Be careful. After saying that, she disappeared on the spot. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Absorb. He had not completely digested the ancient books he had obtained from the shrine. What he needed to do now was to completely digest them. Of course, he couldn't rush it. In any case, he would digest as much as he could. Time passed bit by bit. The auction in 3 days was getting closer and closer. During this time, the entire 2-realm city was very, very peaceful. No one came to cause trouble for Yi Xian. It was unbelievably peaceful. The next night, Xueqi came to Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Is King Yi ready? Yi Xian smiled and said, I'm ready. Xueqi nodded. Before the auction, we want to have a chat with King Yi. Yi Xian smiled slightly. What do you want to talk about? Xueqi said, we want to understand that treasure and the 5-dimensional universe. Of course, in return, we can provide some help to King Yi. Yi Xian asked, what kind of help? Xueqi said in a deep voice, for example, we can tell King Yi which experts are here, how strong they are, who poses the greatest threat to King Yi, and so on. Yi Xian shook his head. To me, these are all empty words. My enemy is everyone, and all of them pose a great threat to me. Xueqi was silent. Yi Xian said, Miss Shi, I need you to help me investigate the Sword Sect. Sword Sect. Xueqi looked at Yi Xian. You know about the Sword Sect. Yi Xian smiled. It seems that Miss Shi also knows about the Sword Sect. Xueqi said in a deep voice, they're here too. Yi Xian nodded. I received news that they're already here. Xueqi sighed and did not say anything. Yi Xian said, what's wrong? Xueqi said in a soft voice, I didn't expect that the Sword Sect would also come out. This Sword Sect, in this 4-dimensional universe, currently has dozens of known sections. These dozens of Sword Sect are from the same branch, and their founder is also the same person. However, they each do their own things and basically do not contact each other. and the strongest sword sect is the one in the Sword Ruins realm. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "How strong is it?" Shi Ziqing glanced at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled. "Say it, I can bear it." Shi Ziqing said in a soft voice, "Very strong, to the point of being unreasonable." Yi Xian did not say anything. Shi Ziqing looked at Yi Xian and said, "As far as I know, there are 2 super experts behind King Yi. If those 2 women come out, they might be able to resist the sword sect. As for King Yi himself..." Saying this, she paused and then said, "For the time being, there is no way to resist them. Of course, King Yi is a genius, and in the future, he will not lose to anyone. But now, King Yi is still too young, and he needs more time." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Shi really knows how to talk." Shi Ziqing said in a deep voice, "King Yi wants to know about the sword sect?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Shi Ziqing was about to say something, but suddenly she frowned. "They're here." Just as her voice fell, streams of divine senses suddenly appeared in the surroundings, but very quickly, these divine senses disappeared. Yi Xian looked around and asked, "Who?" Shi Ziqing said in a deep voice, "The 3 brothers of the Xue family are triplets, and their minds are interlinked, and they are very powerful. When the 3 of them join forces, they are very powerful." Yi Xian said with a smile, "There should be a lot of people, right?" Shi Ziqing nodded. "A lot. We might have to bring it forward." Yi Xian nodded. "Then bring it forward." Shi Ziqing suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian. She looked straight at Yi Xian and said with a Xianqi voice transmission, "King Yi, you should be very clear about your situation. This auction might not be very smooth. If you want to smoothly complete it, the premise is that King Yi has enough strength. If not, something unexpected might happen, because some people will not care about rules with King Yi. This, King Yi must understand." Yi Xian said, "You mean someone might kill me?" Shi Ziqing nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian was silent. Shi Ziqing looked at Yi Xian. "King Yi, do you have a backup plan?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "Wait a moment." After saying that, he disappeared. Prison Pagoda. After Yi Xian returned to the prison pagoda, he went directly to the 8th floor. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Senior, do you want to make a deal?" The 8th floor smiled and said, "No. In fact, I want you to die more than anyone else, but I can't kill you with my own hands." "That's not right. I don't dare to kill you." He really did not dare to kill Yi Xian. Kill Yi Xian. Seize the treasure of the 5th dimension. This karma was too great. Even a powerhouse of his level couldn't withstand it. Therefore, he needed to borrow the hands of others to kill Yi Xian. He could see the karma on Yi Xian, but this expert of the 4th dimension could not. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "Senior, if I die, it might not be good for you." The 8th floor smiled and said, "Why?" Yi Xian smiled faintly, "If I die, this pagoda will be ownerless." The 8th floor said, "Ownerless? At that time, do you think those ants outside can compete with me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "They can't compete with you, but is Senior invincible?" The 8th floor smiled and said, "Are you talking about the girl in the plain dress behind you? Don't worry if you die. After I obtain this pagoda, I will immediately return to the 5th dimension." Yi Xian shook his head. "It's not her. Senior seems to have forgotten. There is another existence inside this pagoda. The 9th floor." At this point, Yi Xian grinned and said, "Senior, do you think the 9th floor is the same as you think? If I die, you will obtain this item. Then he will kill you. In the end, he will not be touched by any karma. Do you think it is possible?" The 8th floor was silent. Chapter 808. The 8th floor's goal was clear. It was the mantis stalking the cicada. He didn't want to kill Yi Xian, or in other words, he didn't dare to. Because he was wary of the person behind Yi Xian. However, he didn't want to give up on the pagoda. The best way was to let someone else kill Yi Xian. Then he would kill the person. That way, the treasure would be in his hands and the karma wouldn't be tainted. However, just like what Yi Xian said, he neglected one thing. That was, there was a 9th floor inside the pagoda. Did the 9th floor wake up? This was a question worth thinking about. Yi Xian smiled. "Senior, I have a better idea. Do you want to hear it?" The 8th floor. "Let's hear it." Yi Xian smiled. There is another way. Give the pagoda to someone else and kill them. That way, you won't be tainted either. Plus, if I don't die, the person behind me won't come after you. The 8th floor. The question is, are you really willing to give it up? Yi Xian shrugged. Do I have a better choice? The 8th floor was silent. If Yi Xian gave it up, then Yi Xian would have nothing to do with the pagoda. Yi Xian continued, Senior, you want the pagoda, not my death, am I right? The 8th floor. I have no grudge against you. Why would I want you dead? Yi Xian nodded. If that's the case, there's no need for us to be enemies, am I right? The 8th floor. Are you really willing to give up the pagoda? You should know what it means. Yi Xian smiled. Is your life more important, or the pagoda? The 8th floor. Of course it's my life. As long as I'm alive, I have limitless possibilities. Yi Xian. Isn't that right? The 8th floor was silent for a moment. Then tell me, why should I help you? Even if I don't help you, you still have to give it up, am I right? Yi Xian said softly. It depends on whether Senior is willing to form a good relationship with me or not. The 8th floor was silent. About a quarter of an hour later, the 8th person suddenly said, I'll help you once. Yi Xian smiled and said, It's enough. With that, he left the World Prison Pagoda. Outside the pagoda, Shi Ziqing looked at Yi Xian. Is Prince Yi ready? Yi Xian nodded. It's done. Shi Ziqing nodded. That's good. With that, she clapped her hands lightly. Behind her, 2 experts suddenly appeared. They bowed slightly to Shi Ziqing before disappearing. Shi Ziqing said, Emperor Yi, one last matter. My dreamy cloud chamber of commerce would like to understand the 5th dimension. Yi Xian smiled and said, All right. As he spoke, he told them everything he knew about the 5th dimension. Of course, he didn't tell them everything. He had only revealed a few words. After a long time, Shi Ziqing looked at Yi Xian. Can that pagoda really lead to the 5th dimension? Yi Xian nodded. It can. Shi Ziqing nodded slightly. I understand. With that, she turned and looked around. Everyone, my dreamy cloud chamber of commerce is hosting this auction. If there is any negligence, I hope that everyone will forgive me. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Prince Yi. Yi Xian took out the World Prison Pagoda and looked around. He smiled and said, Everyone, I won't play any games with you. If this item stays with me, Yi Xian, it will bring me endless trouble. Today, I will hand it over. A treasure of the 5th dimension can only be obtained by those who have the ability. Today, I don't plan on auctioning it. With that, he gently placed the World Prison Pagoda on the ground. Looking at the World Prison Pagoda in his hand, Yi Xian's lips curled into an undetectable smile. The World Prison Pagoda lightly trembled, as if it was responding to something. Yi Xian lightly touched the World Prison Pagoda. Then he looked around again. Whoever wants it can take it. With that, he stood up and left. Seeing this, Shi Ziqing was dumbfounded. Wasn't he going to auction it? In the dark, some experts were also stunned. What kind of game was Yi Xian playing? Yi Xian left decisively. In a short while, he disappeared into the distance. Shi Ziqing looked at the World Prison Pagoda in front of her. After a while, Shi Ziqing turned and left. She didn't dare to take this World Prison Pagoda. Shi Ziqing didn't take it, and no one else did either. The World Prison Pagoda just sat there quietly. 2 hours passed. 4 hours passed. Still no one moved. No one was stupid. Whoever took it first would be the one to be targeted. On the other side, Yi Xian was very leisurely. He didn't leave the 2-world sky because he found that the 2-world sky was completely closed. No one could leave. He didn't plan to leave either. Yi Xian found a quiet place in the city. It was a shabby hall. Next to him was Chao Tian'er. Along the way, Chao Tian'er was silent. Yi Xian looked at Chao Tian'er. Miss Chao, what are you thinking? Chao Tian'er said softly, You're really going to hand it over this time, right? Yi Xian said with a smile, What do you think? Chao Tian'er hesitated and sighed. She didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled. It's not that simple. Chao Tian'er was a little surprised. You Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Everyone wanted his world prison pagoda. It was fine. He might as well take it out and let everyone fight for it. Fight for it. It would be best if they fought for it. Chao Tian looked deeply at Yi Xian. She knew that things weren't that simple. She understood Yi Xian a little since she came into contact with Yi Xian. This person wouldn't be willing to lose out no matter what he did. This time, he took the initiative to hand over the pagoda. It was definitely not that simple. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Miss Chao, you have to hide." Hide. Chao Tian looked at Yi Xian. What are you going to do? Yi Xian said with a smile, "Do one thing." Chao Tian said in a low voice, "Can't you tell me?" Yi Xian looked at Chao Tian. "It's not that I don't trust you. It's for your safety. Please understand." Chao Tian nodded. "Be careful." Then, she was about to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "If possible, leave the two-world sky." Chao Tian looked at Yi Xian for a long time before nodding. "Take care." Then she turned and disappeared. After Chao Tian left, Yi Xian was silent for a while before disappearing as well. At this moment, the world prison pagoda was still untouched. It was still there and hadn't escaped. No one dared to make the first move. The world prison pagoda was a treasure of the fifth dimension. Everyone wanted it, but no one wanted to stand out. Whoever took it first would be everyone's enemy. Thus, no one moved, but no one gave up either. The fifth dimension treasure was at their fingertips. Somewhere in the dark, two women stood quietly, looking at the world prison pagoda in the distance. These two women were Xueqi and Yuan Shaodao from Temple of Gods. Xueqi suddenly said, "Did he really give up?" Yuan Shaodao said calmly, "Give up? That person has a lot of tricks up his sleeves. He must be playing some tricks by doing this." Xueqi shook her head. "These people aren't stupid." Yuan Shaodao said, "They aren't stupid, but they are greedy. As long as a person is greedy, they will easily lose their mind." As she spoke, she looked at the world prison pagoda in the distance. "Let's see who will lose their mind first." As soon as Yuan Shaodao finished speaking, an old man suddenly appeared near the world prison pagoda. The old man wore a gray robe, and his white hair was tied up high. In his left hand was a sheathed long sword wrapped in black cloth. "Sword sect." Yuan Shaodao suddenly said, "Looks like they can't hold it in any longer." Xueqi looked at the old man. The old man didn't care about the experts in the dark. He directly walked to the world prison pagoda and stretched out his hand to take it. At this moment, a dozen powerful auras suddenly enveloped the old man. The old man's eyes narrowed, and he lightly flicked his left thumb. Hum. A sword cry suddenly resounded, and then a sword light slashed out. Chi. A tearing sound suddenly resounded, and then the surrounding auras were completely shattered. The gray-robed old man coldly looked around. "My sword sect wants this item. What high-sounding sentiments." Suddenly, a voice resounded, and then the space in the sky above the gray-robed old man was suddenly torn apart. A moment later, an enormous black palm stretched out from within that space. Bang! The space in the surroundings warped into a strange shape. The gray-robed old man glanced coldly at the enormous palm, and then he opened his palm and a sword suddenly flew out. OM! A sword howl resounded through the sky. Rumble! In the sky, the giant hand was suddenly split into two. However, an afterimage suddenly descended from the sky. The gray-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he stomped his right foot against the ground. Bang! The entire ground trembled violently as the gray-robed old man shot into the sky. Rumble! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and then two figures retreated repeatedly. As they retreated, countless strands of sword energy tore through the sky, and it was an extremely shocking sight. The gray-robed old man had just stopped and was about to attack again when numerous auras pressed down upon him. The gray-robed old man's face fell. He knew that he would be ganged up on if he attacked again. The gray-robed old man glanced coldly at the surroundings. "Do all of you intend to become enemies with my sword sect?" Now, he had no choice but to use the sword sect. The middle-aged man who fought the gray-robed old man earlier sneered. "What? Do you intend to use the sword sect to suppress us?" The gray-robed old man gazed at the middle-aged man. My sword sect is determined to obtain it. The middle-aged man smiled. Looks like you really intend to use the sword sect to suppress us. I admit that the sword sect is powerful, but if we join forces, then we might not have to fear your sword sect. The gray-robed old man's face fell when he heard this. Even the sword sect would have a huge headache if the experts of the Twin World Alliance joined forces. The gray-robed old man fell silent for a moment before he chose to turn around and leave in the end. He could only put it aside for now. At the very least, he had to wait for more experts of the sword sect to arrive. Once the gray-robed old man left, the surroundings returned to calm once more, and no one moved to touch the pagoda. On the other side, the gray-robed old man arrived in midair, and he glanced coldly down below and said, "Do you know where Yixian is?" A voice suddenly resounded from the side. "No." It's like he vanished into thin air. The gray-robed old man's face turned slightly gloomy. That kid sent the pagoda here with the intention of using the experts of the Twin World Alliance to keep my sword sect busy. He's extremely vicious. He can't be allowed to live. We must eliminate him. Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from below. The gray-robed old man was stunned. "One of us." The person behind the gray-robed old man replied with a question. "He's not one of us?" Right at this moment, a furious roar suddenly resounded from below. "You sword sect, how dare you?" The gray-robed old man was speechless. P.S. I've noticed a problem. So long as I want monthly passes, then my heart will be tied down, and I won't be able to attain freedom. So, give it to me. Chapter 809. The gray-robed old man was dumbfounded. What's going on? The gray-robed old man scanned the area with his divine sense, and at this time, a dozen powerful auras suddenly appeared around him. The gray-robed old man frowned. What's the meaning of this? Opposite the gray-robed old man, a middle-aged man slowly walked over. The middle-aged man coldly stared at the gray-robed old man. "Hand over the prison pagoda." "Prison pagoda?" The gray-robed old man spoke in a deep voice. "The old man never took the prison pagoda." The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed. "You didn't take it? Was that sword chime just now fake?" The gray-robed old man stared at the middle-aged man. "The prison pagoda was taken." The middle-aged man smiled. "It seems like your sword sect is quite good at acting." The gray-robed old man sneered. "You're also a joke. You actually let someone take the pagoda under your noses. Are you all blind?" The middle-aged man suddenly disappeared. The gray-robed old man drew his sword and slashed. Rumble! A loud explosion sounded. In an instant, the gray-robed old man and the middle-aged man both retreated. While retreating, the gray-robed old man pointed at the air, and a sword ray shot out from his fingertip. However, as soon as this sword ray appeared, it was instantly crushed by the dozens of powerful auras. At the same time, the dozens of powerful auras directly locked onto the gray-robed old man. The gray-robed old man's face turned gloomy. If it was a one-on-one fight, he wasn't afraid of anyone. However, if they attacked together, he absolutely couldn't win. The gray-robed old man suppressed the anger in his heart. "You're so sure that my sword sect took it just because of a sword chime?" In the distance, the middle-aged man spoke. "Don't keep mentioning the sword sect for no reason. Do you think we're afraid of your sword sect?" The gray-robed old man stared at the middle-aged man. "The old man never took the pagoda." The middle-aged man's gaze gradually turned icy cold. "Besides the sword cultivators of your sword sect, I truly can't think of anyone else who has the ability to silently take away this item under our noses." The gray-robed old man said, "Then isn't Yixian also a swordsman?" The middle-aged man sneered. "What a joke! What realm was Yixian at? How could he take away that treasure in front of us without making a sound? Are you looking down on us?" The gray-robed elder said, "Do you think that Yixian is an ordinary person?" The middle-aged man was expressionless. "Of course he's not an ordinary person. However, I really can't think of what ability he has to be able to take this item away without us noticing." The gray-robed elder fell silent. In fact, he didn't believe that it was Yixian who took it, because Yixian definitely didn't have the ability to take it away in front of so many experts. However, his intuition told him that this matter might be related to Yixian. The middle-aged man said abruptly, "If you don't hand it over, then this day next year might be the day you die." Killing intent. The middle-aged man's eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. A fifth-dimensional treasure. Even the sword sect couldn't make them compromise. At this time, the middle-aged man slowly clenched his fists. In fact, if he had a choice, he also didn't want to fight with the sword sect, but he had no choice. They were determined to get their hands on that fifth-dimensional treasure. The gray-robed elder said in a deep voice, "You can check where Yi Xian is." He still believed that it was possible that Yi Xian had taken it away. In the distance, the middle-aged man was about to speak when a voice sounded in his mind. "This matter is indeed a little strange. Yi Xian isn't a simple person. Let's check where he is to prevent us from being used by others." The middle-aged man nodded slightly. He glanced around and spread out his divine sense like a fishing net. After a while, he found Yi Xian's location. At this moment, Yi Xian was in front of the dual realm sky and seemed to be trying to leave. In the next moment, the middle-aged man appeared in front of Yi Xian. The gray-robed elder wanted to move, but more than 10 divine senses were locked onto him. The gray-robed elder's expression was extremely gloomy, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yi Xian was astonished when he saw the middle-aged man suddenly appear. "You are..." The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian. "Do you have that treasure?" "Treasure?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Didn't I already hand it over?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Someone took it?" The middle-aged man said, "It was a swordsman." Yi Xian asked, "Was it the sword sect?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "You suspect me." The middle-aged man said, "The sword sect said it was you." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you think I have that ability?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "I don't think you have that ability. However, I still want to confirm it." Yi Xian's expression sank. "How do you confirm it?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. "Let me scan you with my divine sense." Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. "Do you think I'm easy to bully?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian grinned. He opened his palm, and a strand of sword light suddenly flew out and shot into the sky. Calling for help. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed. He naturally knew that there was someone behind Yi Xian, and it wasn't an ordinary person. Even the people from the dual realm sky were extremely fearful of the legendary plain-dressed woman. It was precisely because of this that Yi Xian had been able to reach the dual world sky alive. The reason they hadn't attacked him was because they didn't want to become enemies with Yi Xian. The middle-aged man spoke solemnly. "You mean that the members of the sword sect have taken that treasure back to the sword sect?" Yuan Xiaodao replied. "Not necessarily. The dual world sky is closed now, so it won't be easy for the members of the sword sect to leave silently. So, if I'm not wrong, that treasure is still in the dual world sky, and it should be in the hands of the sword sect." When she spoke up to this point, she gazed at the gray-robed old man. "Why don't you tell me the truth?" The gray-robed old man gazed at Yuan Xiaodao. "Who are you?" Yuan Xiaodao smiled, and then she gazed at the middle-aged man. "Why don't you use some secret techniques to interrogate me?" The middle-aged man fell silent for a moment, and then he gazed at the gray-robed old man. "Where exactly is that divine treasure?" "Ha ha!" The gray-robed old man suddenly roared with laughter. "Good! Very good! Very good! Ha ha ha! Just you wait! Just you wait! Ha ha ha!" The gray-robed old man vanished amidst his laughter. The middle-aged man's face was quite gloomy. He hadn't expected that he wouldn't be able to obtain the World Prison Pagoda in the end. Meanwhile, Yuan Xiaodao suddenly said, "Everyone, the sword sect probably won't let the matter rest." The middle-aged man laughed coldly. "Do we need to fear the sword sect?" He wasn't being conceited, but the people who had come here weren't ordinary. Even though the sword sect was very strong, they weren't weak either. Yuan Xiaodao nodded slightly, and then she left silently. The middle-aged man fell silent for a moment before he said, "Everyone, are all of you afraid of the sword sect?" A voice resounded from the shadows. "Ha ha! What's there to be afraid of? Don't worry, Li He. We all played a part in killing that old man from the sword sect. So, we'll advance and retreat with you." The middle-aged man coldly he nodded. "Everyone look around. There are definitely other members of the sword sect in the dual world sky." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had snuck out of the dual world sky. He hadn't chosen to stay in the dual world sky because it wasn't necessary. He wanted to develop in a wretched manner. Yi Xian had just left the dual world sky when numerous rays of light suddenly slashed towards him from afar. Their target wasn't him but the dual world sky. Chapter 8:10. The Dual Realm Sky. On this day, several rays of sword light slashed down. Boom! The gate of the dual realm sky suddenly trembled violently, and then exploded. This was the first time in countless years that the dual realm sky had been attacked. As the gate of the dual realm sky shattered, 3 sword cultivators appeared in the dual realm sky. The leader was a white-robed old man with 2 swords on his back. His gaze was sharp as a sword, and he emanated monstrous killing intent. Behind the white-robed old man stood a middle-aged man and a woman in green. Both of them carried 2 swords on their backs. At this moment, their eyes were filled with ghastly killing intent. The Sword Sect. Although the Sword Sect rarely appeared in the 4th dimension and rarely interfered in worldly affairs, it didn't mean that the Sword Sect didn't have the ability. On the contrary, they looked down on the 4th dimension, so they didn't want to interfere in the 4th dimension's affairs. But now, a member of the Sword Sect had been killed. To the Sword Sect, this was an extraordinary humiliation. Someone dared to kill a member of the Sword Sect. The white-robed old man in the lead glanced coldly at the surroundings. He was about to speak when a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of him. This middle-aged man was Li He. Li He looked at the white-robed old man and didn't speak. The white-robed old man stared fixedly at Li He. "How dare you kill a member of my Sword Sect?" Li He smiled. "What? Can't I kill a member of your Sword Sect?" The white-robed old man narrowed his eyes. In the next moment, he suddenly shouted angrily, "Slash!" Bas! A sword slashed out from behind the white-robed old man. Li He's eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned forward and punched. Boom! A powerful force swept out from his fist. However, the force was shattered before it could even approach the sword. The sword instantly arrived in front of Li He. Li He suddenly roared furiously and punched with both fists. Rumble! An explosion resounded, and in an instant, Li He retreated explosively by almost 3 kilometers. As soon as he stopped, his body began to crack. It was torn apart by countless rays of sword energy. The white-robed old man was just about to attack when more than a dozen afterimages suddenly appeared in the surroundings. The white-robed elder's eyes flashed viciously when he saw this. Slaughter the dual realm sky. As soon as he finished speaking, the other sword on his back also flew out. The 2 people behind him also suddenly made their moves. 3 against 13. Moreover, he was not at a disadvantage at all. On the other side, Yuan Xiaodao and Xueqi watched quietly. A moment later, Yuan Xiaodao whispered, "This sword sect is incredible." Xueqi nodded slightly. The 3 of them from the sword sect were fighting against 13 people, but not only were they not at a disadvantage, they were even suppressing them. Swordsmen. These 3 swordsmen and the other 13 swordsmen were basically at the same realm, but the sword sect's 3 swordsmen were too powerful. Xueqi suddenly asked, "Can the dual realm sky go against the sword sect?" Yuan Xiaodao said with a smile, "Don't underestimate the 2-realm sky. The people here are not simple at all." Xueqi was just about to speak when a powerful pressure swept down from the sky not far away. Then, a black hand suddenly slammed down from the sky. Rumble! Not far away, the 3 swordsmen from the sword sect retreated several thousand zhang. Li He and the rest also retreated several thousand zhang. The white-robed elder leading the sword sect looked up into the sky. From the depths of the sky, a voice sounded, "Can't the sword sect's people be killed?" The white-robed elder narrowed his eyes. "What a big tone you have!" The voice laughed. "The sword sect has already obtained that supreme treasure. What else do you want?" The white-robed elder frowned. "When did my sword sect obtain that supreme treasure?" The voice laughed lightly. "What? Don't tell me that the supreme treasure isn't with your sword sect." The white-robed elder spoke solemnly. "The old man has never seen such a supreme treasure." The voice fell silent for a short moment before it said, "Besides your sword sect, I can't think of any other swordsman who can seize that treasure from right under our noses." The white-robed elder's face was quite gloomy. "What? Do you think the old man is lying to you?" The voice said, "Li He, have you investigated Yi Xian?" Li He nodded. "I have. He doesn't possess that treasure at all. Moreover, even though he isn't simple, he doesn't have the ability to seize that treasure from right under our noses. When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at the white-robed elder. It's definitely the sword sect. I presume that treasure is in his possession. The voice fell silent for a short moment before it said, There's something fishy about this. However, the sword sect is the biggest suspect for now. As he spoke, a powerful pressure enveloped the white-robed elder and the others. Allow my divine sense to search all of you. Search. The white-robed elder's expression instantly became ferocious. It seems to me that all of you really want to die. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm and a ray of light flashed. Call for help. He was very clear that it was absolutely impossible for the three of them to defeat everyone here. He could only call for the experts of the sword sect. Moreover, he couldn't just call for one or two. The white-robed elder had just started to call for help when the voice suddenly resounded from the sky. Kill! As soon as the voice resounded, over 10 people suddenly charged towards the white-robed elder and the others. The white-robed elder laughed savagely. Hold on until our reinforcements arrive. As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 swords on his back suddenly flew out and tore through the sky. The battle had begun once more. In the distance, Xueqi, who stood by Yuan Xiaodao's side, suddenly asked, Where's Yi Xian? Yuan Xiaodao laughed. Him? I wonder where he is right now. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground within a boundless mountain range. At this moment, he was madly absorbing the ancient books he'd obtained from the temple. These books didn't just contain the fist Dao, there were also the spear Dao, sword Dao, saber Dao. In any case, there were a lot of them. He didn't want to learn all of them. Instead, he wanted to absorb their essence to strengthen his sword Dao, or to make up for the shortcomings of his sword Dao. Sword Dao. He was currently at the light state sword Dao. It was very, very difficult for him to improve it further. And these ancient books were his hope. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. During this period of time, no one came to disturb him. This was the most comfortable period for him. While he was cultivating, something big happened in the dual realm sky. In the dual realm sky, after the white-robed elder called for help, the experts of the dual realm sky began to frantically surround the 3 sword sect experts. Although the 3 swordsmen were powerful, they were ultimately defeated. In less than an hour, only the white-robed elder was left. At this moment, the experts of the dual realm sky had already surrounded the white-robed swordsman. The white-robed swordsman coldly swept his gaze around. His expression was incomparably ferocious, the sword in his right hand trembling madly. At this moment, Li He suddenly said, Where is that supreme treasure? The white-robed swordsman looked at Li He and smiled sinisterly. My sword sect will make you pay a painful price. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly roared angrily, Sword burial! As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hand suddenly trembled violently. Then, it turned into a sword light and sank into the space between his eyebrows. Boom! In the blink of an eye, countless sword lights erupted from his body. The leading Sky of 2 Realms expert was caught off guard, and the sword light sliced through his body. The other Sky of 2 Realms experts frantically retreated. With this retreat, everyone retreated tens of thousands of feet away. In the area where the white-robed elder was, the space had already been torn into a pitch-black black hole. After a while, that space returned to normal. Now, the white-robed elder was no longer there. That attack just now was the white-robed elder's final attack. In the distance, Yuan Xiaodao said softly, He self-destructed just like that. This sword sect swordsman is not simple. After saying that, she looked at Xueqi. Quote, Lead the people of the temple and immediately leave the dual realm sky. Quote, Xueqi asked, Why? Yuan Xiaodao said softly, Because the sword sect might make a big move soon. The temple should not participate in this mess. Xueqi nodded. She also did not want to participate. In fact, she did not want to participate in the first place because the temple would not take the prison pagoda no matter what. The temple did not have the ability to possess such a treasure. As if thinking of something, Xueqi suddenly asked, Where is the pagoda now? Where was the prison pagoda? The corners of Yuan Xiaodao's mouth curled up slightly. What do you think? In a mountain range, Yi Xian sat quietly on the ground. Around him, two sword intents were constantly twisting. Break. All this time, he had been thinking about a question. What was breaking? From the name it was breaking. From the perspective of the sword Tao, what was breaking? How could he break it? He did not understand. At this moment, he really wanted someone to remind him, but there was no one. Lian Qian and Yan Jia were not good at the sword Tao, and the 8th floor completely ignored him. As for the sword venerable, he did not say anything and let him comprehend it himself. This gave Yi Xian a headache. Perhaps he would comprehend it if he gave some pointers. However, he also understood later on. There were many things that would only be useful if he understood it himself. No matter how reasonable the words of others were, if he did not experience it himself, he would not be able to understand it. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. In the mountain range, Yi Xian just sat there cross-legged. Many times, the sword Tao relied on enlightenment. Not only the sword Tao, but in fact, many times in life relied on enlightenment. However, some people might not be enlightened their entire lives, just like him. If the opportunity did not come, he might be stuck in the bright realm for the rest of his life. Swordsman. The further one went, the fewer powerful swordsmen there were. Yi Xian just sat there. In the end, he looked like a statue. In the dual realm sky. After the 3 swordsmen from the sword sect were killed, the entire dual realm sky was on high alert. This was because all the experts knew that this matter was not over yet. Apart from that, all the experts in the dual realm sky were looking for the world prison pagoda. This was because they were not sure whether the 5th dimensional treasure was in the hands of the sword sect. In the beginning, some people suspected Yi Xian. However, every time someone suspected Yi Xian, Li He would come out and defend Yi Xian. Because he was the one who had investigated Yi Xian, and Yi Xian really did not have the treasure on him. Moreover, Yi Xian did not have the strength to do so. Therefore, the experts in the dual realm sky ruled out Yi Xian as a suspect. P.S. Some people say that I am becoming more and more shameless. Do you have some misunderstanding about me? Chapter 8:11. No one doubted Yi Xian anymore. Because no one believed that Yi Xian had the ability to steal the pagoda in front of them. With Yi Xian eliminated as a suspect, there was only one target left. The sword sect. Because the one who stole the world prison pagoda was a swordsman. This matter was definitely related to the sword sect. On this day, a swordsman arrived at the dual realm sky. From his appearance, the swordsman looked to be in his 30s. He wore an ink-white robe and held an ancient sword in his left hand. The swordsman's long hair draped over his shoulders. He exuded a scholarly aura as he slowly walked toward the dual realm sky. At this time, Li He suddenly appeared in front of the swordsman. Li He looked at the swordsman without saying a word. The swordsman looked up. Above the clouds stood a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man wore a gray robe with his hands behind his back and a faint smile on his face. The swordsman said softly, "Chen Shi." The most monstrous and powerful person in the myriad star universe back then. The middle-aged man above the clouds was Chen Shi, a legend from a certain universe. Chen Shi smiled. "Looks like your sword sect investigated me." The swordsman nodded. 4 swordsmen from my sword sect died in the dual realm sky. It's all related to you. Chen Shi nodded. It's related to me. Saying so, he looked at the swordsman. And then, the swordsman looked at Chen Shi. You're very confident. Chen Shi shook his head and smiled. Are you threatening me? The sword in the swordsman's left hand suddenly flew out and pierced the sky. Above the clouds, Chen Shi opened his palm and pressed down lightly. Boom! The sword ray was forcibly suppressed in the air. At this time, the swordsman suddenly disappeared. Rumble! In the air, Chen Shi retreated nearly 100 zhang while the swordsman also returned to his original position. The two of them separated upon contact. Chen Shi looked at swordsman and smiled. If you're alone, I'm afraid you won't be able to sweep through the dual realm sky. Swordsman nodded. We underestimated the dual realm sky. At that moment, swordsman realized that they had greatly underestimated the strength of the dual realm sky. Although swordsman was transcendent, the dual realm sky was not weak either. This place was the gathering place of the super powerhouses of countless cosmoses. Since these people dared to rush into the 5th dimension, How could they be ordinary people? The sword sect couldn't crush the two worlds realm. Of course, the sword sect wasn't afraid of the dual realm sky. Swordsman suddenly said, "Do you think that the fifth-dimensional treasure is in the hands of my sword sect?" Chen Shi shook his head. "At first, I did think it was in the hands of your sword sect, but now..." At this point, he glanced at the surroundings and said softly, "Looks like things aren't that simple." The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. It was as if someone was deliberately framing the sword sect. But if someone was framing the sword sect, who was it? Yi Xian. The first person he thought of was Yi Xian. Because if the dual realm sky and the sword sect fought, it would be most beneficial to Yi Xian. However, there was a problem. That was, how could Yi Xian take away that treasure under everyone's noses without anyone noticing? Moreover, Li He had personally inspected Yi Xian and confirmed that the treasure was indeed not on Yi Xian. Of course, he had no time to care about Yi Xian now. After killing a member of the sword sect definitely wouldn't let it go. What he had to face now was the sword sect. Below, the swordsman suddenly said, "Where is Yi Xian?" Chen Shi was about to speak when a voice suddenly came from the side. A voice suddenly came from the side. "Yi Xian? Is the sword sect trying to say that the treasure has returned to Yi Xian's hands?" Chen Shi turned his head and saw a woman slowly walking over. It was Yuan Xiaodao. The swordsman looked at Yuan Xiaodao. "Who are you?" Yuan Xiaodao smiled. "The Temple of Light. The Temple of Light." The swordsman frowned. "What does this have to do with the Temple of Light?" Yuan Xiaodao smiled. "Since you pointed at Yi Xian, you must mean that the treasure is still in Yi Xian's hands, right?" The swordsman retorted. "Isn't it possible? But I feel that the treasure should be in the sword sect's hands. After all, compared to Yi Xian, your sword sect has the ability to take it away from us without a trace. What do you think?" The swordsman shook her head. "According to what my sword sect knows, the treasure seems to have recognized Yi Xian as its master. It is a fifth-dimensional object and has a special ability. If it cooperates with Yi Xian, it wouldn't be difficult for Yi Xian to take it away without a trace and frame my sword sect, right?" Yuan Xiaodao nodded. "What you said isn't impossible." As she spoke, she looked at Li He. "Li He, you personally investigated that Yi Xian. Tell us." Li He said in a deep voice, "I scanned his body with my divine sense, but I didn't find the treasure." The swordsman asked, "So you think the treasure isn't on him?" Li He frowned. Just as he was about to speak, Yuan Xiaodao suddenly said, "How about this? Why don't we go to your sword sect and search it?" The swordsman looked at Yuan Xiaodao. "You represent the sky of two realms?" Yuan Xiaodao smiled. "I'm just saying. Don't take it seriously." She retreated to the side and didn't say anything else. In the sky, Chen Shi was expressionless. As Yuan Xiaodao said, the most suspicious party was the sword sect. Of course, Yi Xian was also a suspect. However, he was less suspicious because he was very weak. Yi Xian might not have thought that the reason he was less suspicious and no longer targeted was because he was weak. It was because he was weak that others thought it was impossible for him to take away the pagoda silently. At this moment, the swordsman suddenly turned around and left. Amongst the people present here, only he was clearly aware that the precious treasure wasn't in the sword sect's possession. Since it wasn't in the sword sect's possession, then who possessed it? The one who took away the treasure was a swordsman. It was very likely that someone was framing the sword sect. Yi Xian. The swordsman decided to find Yi Xian first. He wanted to see Yi Xian in person. As for the death of the sword sect's powerhouse, he could only put it aside for now. Seeing the swordsman leave, Chen Shi and the others didn't stop him because they couldn't. If this kind of powerhouse wanted to leave, it would be very difficult to make him stay. Yuan Xiaodao glanced at the swordsman in the distance and didn't say anything. At this moment, Chen Shi suddenly said, "Pass down my order. Investigate all the suspects." After saying that, he turned around and left. In the mountain range, Yi Xian was still sitting cross-legged on the ground. He had been sitting here for 7 or 8 days. During this time, he was like a statue, not moving at all. Enlightenment. If he wanted to break through to the next realm, he could only rely on enlightenment. What was breaking through? He had been thinking about it for a long time. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes and looked to his right. There was an insect egg on a branch there. Yi Xian stared at the insect egg. About half an hour later, the insect egg suddenly trembled and cracked open. Then, a small butterfly crawled out. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned. Soon, Yi Xian was ecstatic. He understood now. Boom! Boom! Two sword intents suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. After these two sword intents came out, they directly exploded, break? In fact, it was breaking out of a cocoon and being reborn. Without breaking, there can be no construction. With this thought in mind, the two sword intents around Yi Xian's body began to surge crazily like a volcano eruption, extremely terrifying. His sword intents also spread wildly in all directions. Wherever they passed, there was an endless sword chime. Just like that, after about 2 hours, Yi Xian suddenly stood up. He opened his palm, and in an instant, the surrounding sword intents retreated into his palm like a tide. In the end, it turned into a black and white sword condensed from sword intents. Sword of sword intents. Yi Xian suddenly clenched his right hand. Boom! The black and white sword suddenly exploded. In an instant, the surrounding tens of thousands of li was directly covered by his sword intents. Break! This was rebirth. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. His surroundings were covered by sword intents. Under the cover of these sword intents, he could clearly feel everything around him. This feeling was very, very mysterious. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Withdraw." With that, the sword intents instantly disappeared, and in his palm, there was a black and white sword. Breakthrough. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Currently, he was fully capable of fighting against strong people in the life realm. Of course, there was still a gap between him and strong people in the life-breaking realm. After all, he was only in the unknown realm. His realm was still too low. Realm. Right now, his top priority was to improve his realm and his physical body's realm. Yi Xian waved his right hand lightly, and the black and white sword in his hand instantly vanished. After that, he was about to leave. However, right at this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly tore through the sky and descended directly in front of him in the blink of an eye. The sword ray dissipated, revealing a middle-aged man. The man was the swordsman from the sword sect. Yi Xian looked at the swordsman in front of him without saying a word. The swordsman also looked at Yi Xian. As he watched, his pupils suddenly shrank. Breakthrough. How is this possible? Yi Xian looked at the swordsman. What's the matter? The swordsman stared at Yi Xian. When did you achieve breakthrough? Yi Xian asked in return. You are. The swordsman said, Sword sect, Xueqi. Sword sect. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. What kind of grudge do I have with your sword sect? Your sword sect just won't let me go. Xueqi looked at Yi Xian. Is that fifth-dimensional treasure still in your hands? Yi Xian frowned. Isn't it in your sword sect's hands? Xueqi looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Isn't it in your sword sect's hands? Xueqi still said nothing. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Why do you think it's in my hands? Xueqi said, Intuition. Yi Xian said indifferently, That treasure is indeed not in my hands. Saying this, he paused and said, That day after I left it there, I was preparing to leave the dual realm sky. Later, the dual realm sky powerhouse Li He suddenly came to me and told me that the treasure was no longer there. I don't know if what he said was true or false. Hearing this, Xueqi frowned. Is it possible that they have already obtained that treasure, but in order to protect it, they deliberately framed my sword sect? Yi Xian. Chapter 8:12. Yi Xian didn't say anything. Xueqi fell silent as well. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. A short while later, Xueqi looked at Yi Xian. Of course, there's another possibility. That treasure is in your hands, Yi Xian, and you've purposely given it up to shift the blame to my sword sect and reap the benefits. Yi Xian smiled. You think too highly of me. If I had that ability, why would I hand it over? Xueqi looked at Yi Xian in silence. Yi Xian smiled. It looks like you don't believe me. Xueqi said, I really don't believe you. Yi Xian smiled. Then I have no other choice. However, I still want to ask you something. Do you really think I have the ability to take away that treasure? Jiang Qi fell silent. Yi Xian walked to Jiang Qi. There are two possibilities now. First, the treasure is in my hands, and I shift the blame to your sword sect, causing your sword sect and the dual world skies experts to suffer heavy losses while I reap the benefits. Second, the treasure has already been obtained by the dual world skies experts, and they've chosen to shift the blame to your sword sect and make your sword sect take the blame. Now, which possibility do you think is more likely? Jiang Qi looked at Yi Xian, and his left thumb suddenly pressed against the hilt of his sword, ready to strike. Yi Xian smiled. If you really make a move, then you'll really be playing into someone's hands. Because they'll definitely hope that the person behind me will fight your sword sect to the death. The person behind him. Jiang Qi narrowed his eyes. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that Yi Xian was not a loner. This fellow had someone behind him as well. Moreover, they weren't weak. If the sword sect and the person behind Yi Xian fought to the death, who would benefit the most? Naturally, it would be the dual world skies experts. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "The sword sect's people have been killed. Yet, all of you are still entangled with that fifth-dimensional treasure. If I may be so bold as to ask, have you ever thought about those dead swordsmen? Did they die unjustly?" With that, Yi Xian glanced at Jiang Qi contemptuously, then turned around and left. Behind Yi Xian, Jiang Qi remained silent. His left thumb stared at the hilt of his sword, but in the end, he chose not to attack. Just as Yi Xian had said, the people of the sword sect were dead. Now, it was no longer just a matter of the fifth-dimensional treasure. If the sword sect attacked Yi Xian would most likely join hands with the dual world sky. Yi Xian alone wasn't scary, but the people behind him were. After a moment of silence, Jiang Qi turned and left. Yi Xian didn't hide or return to the black-yellow great world. On the contrary, he returned to the dual world sky. The reason why he didn't hide was because the more he hid, the more dangerous it would be. On the contrary, the more high-profile he appeared, the safer he would be. This was because the more he did so, the less people would think that the fifth-dimensional treasure was on him. When Yi Xian returned to the dual world sky, Li He appeared in front of him once again. Yi Xian cupped his fists. "Senior Li He." Li He was slightly startled. He hadn't expected Yi Xian to be so courteous, so he wasn't used to it. However, he still returned the greeting politely. Yi Xian suddenly said, "The sword sect's people came looking for me." Li He looked at Yi Xian. "Why?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "They think that the treasure is on me." Li He said with a smile, "Then is it on you or not?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Senior Li He, do you really think that the fifth-dimensional treasure will recognize me as its master?" Li He was silent. Yi Xian said, "If such a treasure really recognized me as its master, I would have brought it into the fifth dimension long ago. Why would I stay in the fourth dimension and be targeted by so many experts?" Li He nodded. "That's true," Yi Xian said again. "However, the sword sect insists that the treasure is on me. I really don't know what their intentions are." Li He said in a low voice, "I'm afraid they want to use you to attract our attention and then make us fight you until both sides suffer." Yi Xian frowned. "That's not possible." Li He smiled coldly. "Why not?" Yi Xian said, "They are all swordsmen. Why would they use such despicable methods?" Li He shook his head. "Little friend, you are still too young and naive." Yi Xian said in a low voice. "Senior, what do you mean?" Li He said in a low voice. "This is not some despicable method. It's a scheme. Moreover, swordsmen are not all straightforward. There are many who use underhanded methods. Little friend, you are still too young. You don't know how complicated the human nature of this world is." Yi Xian sighed and did not say anything. Li He suddenly said, "Little friend, I think that the sword sect will definitely not let you off. What are your plans from now on?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "The sword sect is powerful. What else can I do? I can only escape." Li He looked at Yi Xian. "You can't escape. For you, there are only two safe places in the fourth dimension. One is the Life Forbidden Zone and the other is the Dual Realm Sky. As for the Life Forbidden Zone, you can't go to that place. They will not take you in either." Yi Xian looked at Li He. "Senior, can I stay in the Dual Realm Sky?" Li He smiled. Of course. You should know that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yi Xian hurriedly bowed. Many thanks. Li He said. Little friend, I will bring you to see someone. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. Li He left with Yi Xian. Soon, the two of them came to a river. There was a small wooden house by the river. In front of the wooden house was a courtyard. In the courtyard, a middle-aged man was lying on a chair, swaying gently. This middle-aged man was Chen Shi. After Li He brought Yi Xian to the courtyard. He bowed slightly and then quietly retreated. Yi Xian looked at Chen Shi. Senior. Chen Shi said softly. Come here. Yi Xian walked to Chen Shi's side. Chen Shi looked at Yi Xian. His eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. However, Yi Xian's expression did not change. Chen Shi retracted his gaze. Sit. As his voice fell, a wooden chair appeared behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not stand on ceremony. He sat down. Senior, you were looking for me? Chen Shi said softly. You have the most contact with that fifth-dimensional treasure. Can you tell me about it? Yi Xian was silent. Chen Shi smiled. What is it? Yi Xian smiled. Senior, do you want to hear the truth or a lie? Chen Shi looked at Yi Xian. What do you think? Yi Xian said softly. Senior, let me tell you something from the bottom of my heart. Whoever obtains that fifth-dimensional treasure will be unlucky. Chen Shi said. Karma? Yi Xian was a little surprised. He did not expect that Chen Shi would know that there was karma with the fifth-dimensional treasure. Chen Shi smiled. Such a divine object must carry a powerful karma. The reason why the temple master did not take it is also because of this, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Chen Shi suddenly said. Do you know why you are still alive? Yi Xian hesitated, then said. Maybe I am lucky. Chen Shi laughed. You are really funny. Let me tell you, the reason why you're still alive is because you've been holding on to this treasure of the fifth dimension until now. Simply put, there's definitely someone who's shouldering the karma of this object for you. I'm afraid the person behind you is much more frightening than we can imagine. Yi Xian smiled, but did not say anything. Chen Shi suddenly said, Can that fifth-dimensional treasure really lead to the fifth dimension? Yi Xian nodded. It can. Chen Shi smiled. Then why don't you use it to lead to the fifth dimension? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Senior, if I go to the fifth dimension when I haven't even settled down in the fourth dimension, wouldn't that be courting death? Chen Shi laughed. Indeed. Saying this, his expression suddenly became complicated. If we go to the fifth dimension, won't we also be courting death? Yi Xian was puzzled. Then why do you and the others? Chen Shi looked at Yi Xian. Our road in the fourth dimension has come to an end. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. Chen Shi and the others had reached their limits. If they wanted to go further, they could only go to the fifth dimension. Thinking of this, Yi Xian asked again, Senior, is there no way to go further in the fourth dimension? Chen Shi said softly, Do you know what is the highest realm in the fourth dimension? Yi Xian shook his head. Chen Shi said, Above the life realm is life-breaking realm, and there are 3 known realms above life-breaking realm. Seeking Tao, entering Tao, and breaking Tao. In the history of the 2 realms, there has only been one person who has reached the Tao-breaking realm. Saying this he paused, then said, Actually, it is said that there is another realm above the Tao-breaking realm. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, What realm? Chen Shi's expression became a bit complicated. Destroying Tao. Saying this, he looked up at the vast sky and said softly, Seeking Tao, entering Tao and breaking Tao, I know all of them, but what does destroying Tao mean? How do I destroy this Tao? Are you kidding me? Yi Xian hesitated then said, Senior, what realm are you in? Chen Shi said with a smile, The peak of the life-breaking realm. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Just as he was about to speak, Chen Shi suddenly said, The woman in the plain dress behind you should be at least at the peak of the life-breaking realm, right? The woman in the plain dress? Yi Xian was silent. He really did not know the realm of the woman in the plain dress. How strong was she? However, if he guessed wrong, the woman in the plain dress must be more than the peak of the life-breaking realm. It was just a kind of intuition. Just how strong was she? It was always a mystery. At this moment, Chen Shi suddenly said, "In the legendary fifth dimension, there must be experts at the destroying Dao realm," Yi Xian said in a deep voice. "Senior, to be honest, we are going to the fifth dimension to be beaten up. Moreover, once the passage between the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension is opened, our fourth dimension will be in danger, right?" Chen Shi shook his head. "Dao is big, and living beings are small." Hearing this, Yi Xian was silent. He also wanted to become stronger, but if he had to sacrifice others to become stronger, he would not do it. As a person, you can be shameless, but you must have a bottom line and principles. His principle was that if people did not offend him, he would not offend them. Chen Shi suddenly asked, "Is that fifth dimension treasure still in your hands?" Yi Xian shook his head decisively. "No." Chen Shi was silent. Somewhere in the vast starry sky, a woman in a plain dress slowly walked in the starry sky. She just walked like that, dressed in plain clothes, like a goddess from the 9 heavens. After an unknown amount of time, she suddenly stopped. Not far in front of her, the space suddenly split open. Soon, a middle-aged man walked out. The middle-aged man looked around and said softly, "Is this the fourth dimension? So weak." As he said this, his gaze fell on the woman in the plain dress. "We have tolerated you for a long time. P.S. Update late. I will punish myself by not going to the Great Treasure Sword today." The voice seemed to be right in front of them, but it also seemed to be very far away. After a moment, the scene returned to normal. At this moment, the plain-dressed woman had already arrived in another part of the starry sky. In the boundless starry sky, the plain-dressed woman slowly walked. Her left hand was holding a strand of her beautiful hair. Her beautiful hair was gently twirling around her fingertips. She seemed to be thinking of something, and the corners of her mouth would curl up from time to time. At this moment, she was a little happy. When people lived, they needed to be tied down and worried about something. Only then would there be meaning in living. There was not only the way of the sword, not only longevity, but also him. After an unknown amount of time, the plain-dressed woman arrived in front of a spatial black hole. Within the spatial black hole, there was a powerful force that was constantly devouring her. The plain-dressed woman glanced at the black hole and was about to leave. But at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out from the pitch-black hole. "You're so strong." The plain-dressed woman stopped and raised her eyebrows. "How strong?" The voice asked in reply, "How strong?" The corners of the plain-dressed woman's mouth curled up slightly. "I don't know." The voice fell silent. The plain-dressed woman turned to leave. At this moment, the voice spoke again. "You should go to the legendary fifth dimension," the plain-dressed woman said. "Without him in the fifth dimension, what's the point of going there? The place where he is my heaven." As soon as she finished speaking, she had already disappeared at the end of the galaxy. In the field, a sigh rang out. "Those who can go don't go, and those who want to go can't go. What a sin." In the dual realm sky. At this moment, the dual realm sky was abnormally quiet. After Jiang Qi from the sword sect left, no swordsman came to the dual realm sky again. Therefore, the dual realm sky was very peaceful. However, the experts in the dual realm sky knew that this was the calm before the storm. Would the sword sect let this matter rest? No. In front of the bamboo house, Yi Xian did not leave during this period of time. He had been following Chen Shi. In the courtyard, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. He was madly devouring swords. Rushing to the peak. Above the unknown realm was the creation realm, and above the creation realm was Earth Immortal. Above the Earth Immortal was the Fate realm. After the Fate realm was Fate Breaking, Seeking Dao, Entering Dao, Breaking Dao, and the legendary Dao Destruction. At present, the Dao Destruction realm might be the highest realm in the fourth dimension. As for the Dao Destruction realm, maybe it existed, maybe it didn't. In any case, regardless of whether it existed or not, what he needed to do now was to reach the Fate-Breaking realm. No, it would be best if he reached the Seeking Dao or Entering Dao. Chen Shi was not far away from Yi Xian. He was also a little surprised that Yi Xian did not leave. Yi Xian completely treated this place as his own home. During this period of time, he had been observing Yi Xian. He also wanted to know whether the treasure was in Yi Xian's hands. If it was really in Yi Xian's hands, it would mean that Yi Xian was sowing discord between the dual realm sky and the sword sect. When that happened, Yi Xian would definitely die. However, after interacting with him for a few days, he felt that the treasure might really not be in Yi Xian's hands. If it was really in Yi Xian's hands, Yi Xian would definitely not dare to stay in front of him. After a while, Chen Shi withdrew his gaze. At this moment, Li He suddenly appeared in front of him. Li He said solemnly, "The sword sect might be making a big move." Chen Shi nodded slightly. "How many people are coming?" Li He shook his head. "I don't know for now." Li He looked at Chen Shi, who said solemnly, "I can't find anything. I only know that the swordsman is rushing towards our dual realm sky." After a moment of silence, Chen Shi said, "Let our people prepare." Li He said, "Are we really going to fight to the death with the sword sect?" Chen Shi said softly, "This matter will not end after we kill the sword sect's people." Li He said, "Is the fifth dimensional treasure in the hands of the sword sect?" Now, the experts of the dual realm sky were not most concerned about the sword sect, but the fifth dimensional treasure. Was the fifth dimensional treasure in the sword sect? No one could be sure. Meanwhile, the sword sect was also wondering whether the fifth dimensional treasure was in the hands of the experts of the dual realm sky. Of course, this was not important now. The main problem now was that several swordsman experts of the sword sect had fallen in the dual realm sky. If the sword sect did not act, the prestige the sword sect had built up over countless years would be gone. Chen Shi suddenly looked at Yi Xian, who was still cultivating not far away. "Little friend Yi, the people of the sword sect are about to arrive. What do you think?" Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at Chen Shi. After a moment of silence he said, "Then, I'll run." Li He's mouth twitched. "Little friend Yi, why are you afraid of them?" Yi Xian sighed softly. "I'm alone. How can I fight against the sword sect? In fact, I'm not afraid of death. What I'm afraid of is being made a scapegoat. The sword sect has always emphasized that the fifth dimensional treasure is still with me." "How vicious." Chen Shi nodded. "Indeed vicious. Little friend, it's more dangerous for you to go somewhere else. Why don't you join us to fight against the sword sect?" Yi Xian wanted to say something but hesitated. Chen Shi asked, "What?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "My strength is low. I'm afraid I won't be of much help. I'm not trying to decline. I'm just an unknown realm cultivator." Chapter 8:14. Chen Shi and Li He looked at each other in silence. A moment later, Li He sent a voice transmission to Chen Shi. "This person has great potential and is extremely powerful. Why don't we help him and form a good relationship?" Chen Shi nodded. As long as the prison pagoda was not in Yi Xian's hands, there was no conflict between Yi Xian and the dual realm sky. Since there was no irreconcilable conflict, they could make friends because Yi Xian was worthy of their friendship. Li He looked at Yi Xian and pointed with a finger. An ancient black sword landed in front of Yi Xian. "I obtained this sword by chance years ago. However, I'm not a swordsman, so I've never used it. I'll give it to you now." Yi Xian took the ancient sword. Good sword. That was his first thought. He didn't know what rank this sword was, but it definitely wasn't low. Of course, it was definitely weaker than his soul-suppressing sword and executing heaven sword. However, if it was used for devouring, it would be the most suitable. Meanwhile, Chen Shi suddenly said, "I'll give you something as well." As soon as he said that, a sword suddenly flew in front of Yi Xian. The sword was more than 4 feet long and was dark blue in color. The tip of the sword was missing a small horn, and the entire sword emitted a faint sword glow as if it wanted to stab someone. Good sword. Yi Xian's eyes lit up. This sword was even better than the one Li He gave him. Yi Xian put away the 2 swords and bowed to the 2. "Thank you, seniors." He paused, then added, "I need to cultivate in seclusion for a while. It won't be long." Chen Shi laughed. "No problem." Yi Xian bowed again, then retreated to the side and began devouring. Chen Shi and Chen Shi left. Somewhere in the starry sky outside the dual realm sky, an old man suddenly appeared. The old man held a sword in his left hand, and there was another sword hanging from his waist. The old man was slightly thin, and his hair was tied up high. He looked very spirited. This old man was the Sword Sect Protector Elder, Du Jian. In the Sword Sect, he could be ranked in the top 5. Behind Du Jian were 7 other people, 6 men and 1 woman. All 6 of them carried swords on their backs, and their gazes were as sharp as blades. There were only 8 of them. And these 8 people were all from the Sword Sect Guardian Hall. The so-called Sect Guardian Hall was a sharp sword that the Sword Sect used to defend against outsiders. This time, the Sword Sect had sent out the Sect Guardian Hall, which meant that they were serious. Du Jian looked in the direction of the dual realm sky. Someone must be framing our Sword Sect, and the most suspicious person is Yi Xian. Behind Du Jian, a male swordsman said in a deep voice, "But that Yi Xian is only an unknown realm," Du Jian said indifferently. "But don't forget that he once surmounted his realm to kill countless people. Moreover, that 5th-dimensional treasure seems to have recognized him as its master. If he cooperates with that 5th-dimensional treasure, then it's extremely likely that he'll be able to silently take it away and shift the blame to my sword sect because he's a sword cultivator." What Du Zuantong said is correct. At this moment, a voice came from the side. The person who had come was Jiang Qi. Jiang Qi walked to Du Jian's side. "This Yi Xian is not as simple as we think. He is a crafty person. This time, he deliberately brought the 5th-dimensional treasure with him. His goal is to use the experts of the dual realm sky to fight against our sword sect, and he will reap the benefits from it." At this point, he paused slightly. "But we have no evidence." Du Jian said calmly, "What evidence do you need? Our sword sect's sword is the evidence. Let's not talk about Yi Xian first. Since the dual realm sky dared to kill our sword sect's people, they must pay the price. As for whether they were framed or not, that is no longer important. What is important is that our sword sect's people are dead." The sword sect's people were dead. Jiang Qi was silent. He knew that even if there was any misunderstanding between the sword sect and the dual realm sky, it was already irreparable. The sword sect's people were dead. Du Jian suddenly said, "Kill." As soon as he said this, the sword at his waist suddenly flew out and slashed at the dual realm sky in the distance. The sword cut through the sky and tore through everything. Just as the sword was about to slash into the dual realm sky, an illusory fist hundreds of meters long suddenly tore through space and arrived in front of the sword. Boom! The sky shook violently. The sword instantly flew back in front of Du Jian, and the illusory fist immediately turned into nothingness. At this moment, Chen Shi appeared a short distance away from Du Jian and the others. Behind him were 16 people, all of whom were super experts of the dual realm sky. Even though they were facing the sword sect, there was not the slightest hint of fear in their eyes. Those who could come to the dual realm sky were very arrogant. Did they need to fear others? In the distance, the sword sect's Du Jian looked at Chen Shi and didn't waste any words. He lightly flicked his left thumb. Bas! The sound of a sword suddenly rang out. The next moment, a sword light slashed in front of Chen Shi. At this moment, a saber had appeared in Chen Shi's hand. He raised the saber and slashed forward. Break! Boom! As the saber slashed down, the sword instantly flew back in front of Du Jian. The sword trembled violently as if it was withstanding an enormous force. A saber cultivator. Du Jian looked at Chen Shi. "I'm a little blind." Chen Shi said with a smile. "The sword sect hasn't stepped into the secular world for many years. In your eyes, your status is transcendent and you can look down on everything. Unfortunately, you underestimate the dual realm sky. The four-dimensional universe isn't something that your sword sect has the final say in." Du Jian sneered. "Is that so?" Chen Shi's smile grew wider. "You don't believe me? Let's give it a try." Du Jian sneered. "Let's give it a try. Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, he was suddenly sent flying. Bas! The sound of a sword's hum shook the sky. Behind him, Jiang Qi and the others also rushed out. 8 sword lights streaked across the sky, heading straight for Chen Shi and the others. Chen Shi said softly, "Don't be careless." As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly stomped his right foot and swung the long saber in his hand. A wave of saber light slashed out. Rumble! Soon, the entire sky was filled with battles. However, as soon as they started fighting, the dual realm sky side was directly crushed by the 8 people from the sword sect. Although the sword sect only had 8 people, which was half the number of the dual realm sky's side. The 8 people's battle prowess was somewhat terrifying. Not only were they not at a disadvantage when fighting 1 against 2, they could even suppress them. However, the dual realm sky's experts weren't pushovers. Although they were suppressed, it wouldn't be easy for the sword sex experts to kill them. On the other side, 2 women were watching the battlefield. They were Xueqi and Yuan Xiaodao. Xueqi had already ordered all the experts from Deity's Templar to return to Deity's Templar. Deity's Templar would no longer participate in these muddy waters. The situation was too complicated. Yuan Xiaodao suddenly said, "Both sides will suffer." Xueqi fell silent. After this battle, both the Sword Sect and the Dual Realm Sky would suffer great losses. If the Sword Sect had suppressed the Dual Realm Sky from the start, their losses would definitely be much smaller. However, the problem was that the Sword Sect didn't have the ability to directly suppress the Dual Realm Sky. The Sword Sect had underestimated the Dual Realm Sky. Moreover, the Dual Realm Sky's strength was far from this. However, some people also chose to watch and didn't make a move. If the Sword Sect really wanted to destroy the entire Dual Realm Sky, then these hidden people would definitely make a move. This was because there was a passage to the 5th dimension in the Dual Realm Sky, and this passage had been opened by countless experts of the Dual Realm Sky with their lives. If it was somewhere else, who would be able to open it? Yuan Xiaodao said softly, "The Sword Sect made 2 mistakes. The first mistake was that they shouldn't have targeted everyone in the Dual Realm Sky. The second mistake was that they underestimated the Dual Realm Sky." Xueqi suddenly said, "There's another mistake." Yuan Xiaodao looked at Xueqi who said softly, "They shouldn't have underestimated that Yi guy." Yi Xian. Yuan Xiaodao was silent. She had interacted with Yi Xian many times, and this swordsman was completely different from other swordsmen. He had many devious thoughts. There was only one way to deal with Yi Xian, and that was to kill him without giving him any chance. Otherwise, there would be endless troubles in the future. Others might not know, but she knew that the treasure was definitely still in Yi Xian's hands. Xueqi suddenly said, "How do you think this will end?" Yuan Xiaodao looked not far away. If both sides continued to fight like this, both sides would definitely suffer great losses. This was a loss that neither side could afford. Even if it was the Sword Sect, if these 9 people died here, it would definitely be a huge blow to the Sword Sect. But now that it had reached this point, it was impossible to stop. After all, several swordsmen from the Sword Sect had been killed by the people of the Dual Realm Sky. At this time, Xueqi suddenly said, "What do you think that Yi Xian is doing now?" Yuan Xiaodao said indifferently, "He must be secretly laughing right now." Xueqi shook his head and smiled. "This guy." While the experts of the Dual Realm Sky were fighting with the Sword Sect, Yi Xian was currently trying to break through to the Extreme Creation Realm. He was very leisurely now, because no one came to disturb him. After he obtained the 2 swords that Chen Shi and Li He gave him, he started to devour them. After devouring one of the swords, his aura started to rise crazily, and he was getting closer and closer to the Extreme Creation Realm. Just like that, after about 2 hours, Yi Xian devoured another sword. Boom! A powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body, and at the same time, his sword will also vibrated in his body. The aura around him grew stronger and stronger, and after about 2 hours, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Wang! The sound of a sword suddenly rang out, and in Yi Xian's eyes, 2 rays of sword light flashed like lightning, and the 2 sword wheels around him suddenly swept out in all directions. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly opened his left hand, and the surrounding sword wheels instantly disappeared without a trace. At the same time, in the palm of his left hand, there was an additional black and white sword condensed from sword will. Extreme Creation Realm. Now, after devouring the 2 swords, he had directly reached the Extreme Creation Realm from the Unknown Realm. Now he had reached the Extreme Creation Realm, his physical body had reached the Extreme Creation Realm, and his sword Dao attainment had broken through. In his current state, he could even fight against a life-breaking state expert. Because he still had the Executing Heaven Sword and the Immortal Slaying Sword Gourd. If his realm was not enough, he could make up for it with equipment. Yi Xian looked down at the black and white sword in his hand, and the corner of his mouth curled up slightly. Go kill people. Chapter 8:15. Outside the dual world sky. The experts of the dual world sky were still locked in battle with the sword sect. At this moment, some of the experts of the dual world sky had fallen. As for the sword sect, not a single expert had fallen. The dual world sky had fallen into a complete disadvantage. Steady suppression. The swordsman's combat strength really couldn't be compared to ordinary experts in the same realm of cultivation. Even Chen Shi, a peerlessly talented super expert, found it very difficult to deal with the sword sect's Du Jian. Hiss. Suddenly, another bloody head flew into the air. It was an expert from the dual world sky. At this moment, 3 experts from the dual world sky had fallen. Chen Shi's expression gradually turned gloomy. Because he was in a very bad situation right now. Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from afar. Chen Shi swiftly turned his head, and he saw the head of a nearby swordsman from the sword sect fly into the air. Hiss. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Everyone was stunned. Who killed him? Because they didn't see the culprit after the swordsman was killed. The experts from the sword sect stopped fighting and became vigilant. Du Jian glanced at the surroundings with an icy cold gaze. Who did it? Beside Du Jian, Jiang Qi said in a low voice. It might be that Yi Xian. That person knows a special sword skill. Once he uses it, he will become invisible and no one will be able to find him. Yi Xian. Du Jian glanced at the surroundings, and it didn't take long for his sword intent to sweep out like a net. However, he still didn't notice Yi Xian. It was as if Yi Xian didn't exist at all. Du Jian's face fell. Is he a swordsman? He's an assassin. On the other hand, Chen Shi heaved a slight sigh of relief. He knew that Yi Xian had made a move. At this moment, he was also a little shocked. Yi Xian could actually kill someone in an instant. Although Yi Xian had launched a sneak attack and caught him off guard, this attack was still very terrifying. It should be noted that the 7 people behind Du Jian were at least experts at the peak of the life realm. Not only that, but they could even fight against experts at the life-breaking realm. However, he was instantly killed by Yi Xian. This strength was not just any ordinary kind of terrifying. Fortunately, Yi Xian was from the dual realm sky. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Attack! It was Yi Xian's voice. Chen Shi glanced at the surroundings, and then he suddenly said, Attack! As soon as he finished speaking, he charged towards Du Jian. He knew that now that Yi Xian was secretly helping them, this was an opportunity for the dual realm sky. As Chen Shi attacked, the 2 realm sky experts behind him also made their moves. In the distance, Du Jian's eyes narrowed slightly. Watch out for Yi Xian in the dark. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew the sword at his waist. OM! A sword howl shook the sky, and then a ray of sword light tore through the sky and slashed at Chen Shi. Both sides began fighting again. This time, the sword sect's experts weren't able to suppress Chen Shi and the others, because they had to divert some of their attention to deal with Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian was watching them from the dark. Around 2 hours later, a sword howl suddenly resounded. Along with this sword howl, the expression of one of the sword cultivators from the sword sect instantly changed drastically. He swiftly turned around and raised the sword in his hand to block. At this moment, a sword just happened to strike his sword. Hiss! The sword in his hand was instantly slashed into 2 by Yi Xian's sword. Then, Yi Xian's executing heaven sword slashed down from the top of the swordsman's head. Hiss! The swordsman was instantly sliced into pieces. The swordsman's soul intended to flee, but it didn't take long for a mysterious force to absorb his soul. Soul-suppressing sword. Executing heaven sword targeted the body, while soul-suppressing sword targeted the soul. After the swordsman's soul was absorbed, Yi Xian vanished as if he'd never been there. As soon as the swordsman vanished, the expressions of the remaining experts from the sword sect changed. He was instantly killed again. That was too terrifying. Meanwhile, Du Jian spoke decisively. Retreat! As soon as he finished speaking, the experts from the sword sect hurriedly retreated explosively. As for Chen Shi, he hesitated for a moment but didn't choose to pursue them in the end. Because the dual world sky had suffered heavy losses as well. If they pursued them, then they would really perish together. It wasn't worth it. Suddenly, Yi Xian appeared by Chen Shi's side. Yi Xian said solemnly, Let me sense to see if they have the fifth-dimensional treasure. Chen Shi was slightly taken aback, but then he hurriedly nodded. Okay. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He suddenly stretched out his right hand and clenched it. In an instant, the space in front of Du Jian trembled slightly. Then, an illusory Xiao Ta appeared in front of him. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. It's in his hands. Kill him. In the distance, Du Jian was dumbfounded when he saw the prison pagoda suddenly appear. Why did the fifth-dimensional treasure suddenly appear here? Without thinking too much, Du Jian directly grabbed the prison pagoda. Retreat! At this moment, Chen Shi suddenly roared, Stop them! As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately rushed out. Originally, he didn't want to chase after Du Jian and the others because it wasn't worth it to perish together with them. However, at this moment it was worth it. Because the fifth-dimensional treasure was on Du Jian. At this moment, Chen Shi and the others were like madmen, madly chasing after Du Jian and the others. As for Yi Xian, he quietly disappeared and hid. In the distance, Xueqi solemnly said, Is the treasure in the sword sect's hands? Yuan Xiaodao shook his head. If it's really in their hands, then Du Jian wouldn't be so surprised. Moreover, this thing's appearance is really strange. Yi Xian, Xueqi solemnly said, It must be this guy's doing. Yuan Xiaodao softly said, This guy wants to kill the sword sect. In the distance, Chen Shi and the others were madly running. However, the distance between them and the sword sect was indeed increasing. For experts like Du Jian and the others, if they didn't want to fight, it would be very difficult for others to stop them. Just as the sword sect was about to completely disappear, a powerful pressure suddenly enveloped Du Lin and the others. Another expert from the dual realm sky had made a move. Chen Shi and the others weren't the only ones in the dual realm sky. There were other experts too. Previously, these people didn't make a move because they weren't sure if the treasure was in the sword sect's hands. But now they were sure. Therefore they couldn't sit still anymore. Because once Du Jian and the others brought the treasure to the sword sect, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to take it back. When that powerful pressure appeared, Du Jian, who was the leader, instantly changed his expression. Du Jian suddenly opened his right hand and the treasure appeared in his palm. Looking at the treasure in his hand, Du Jian's expression was complicated. Fifth-dimensional treasure. This was a treasure that could allow people to go to the fifth dimension. After a moment of silence, Du Jian suddenly looked at Jiang Qi beside him. Bring it back to the sword sect. Jiang Qi was about to speak when the world prison pagoda flew in front of him. Du Jian angrily roared, All of you, go back to the sword sect. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to look at Chen Shi and the others who had already rushed over and smiled sinisterly. Bring it on. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hand suddenly trembled violently. A moment later, a sword light flew out. The instant Du Jian attacked, Jiang Qi and the others decisively chose to leave. They knew that Du Jian wanted to make Chen Shi and the others stay and buy time for them. Their top priority now was to bring the treasure back to the sword sect. Just as Jiang Qi and the others were about to leave, an old man suddenly appeared in front of them. The old man coldly looked at Jiang Qi and the others. You want to go back? As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack when Du Jian suddenly turned into a sword light and slashed at the old man. The old man narrowed his eyes and suddenly punched out. Boom! This punch forced Du Jian to stop in his tracks. At this moment, Chen Shi and the others had already surrounded Jiang Qi and the others. Seeing this, the expressions of Du Jian and the others sank. We can't leave. Chapter 8:16. Countless sword lights shot out from Du Jian and the swordsman behind him. In an instant, the sky within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was covered by the sword lights. At the same time, Du Jian's furious roar resounded. Retreat! Upon hearing Du Jian's words, Jiang Qi turned around and left without the slightest hesitation. After that, he turned around and flew away on his sword, disappearing into the distant horizon in the blink of an eye. The experts of the dual realm sky wanted to give chase, but they were blocked by countless sword lights. After Du Jian and the others sacrificed their swords, they were many times stronger than before. Therefore, The experts of the dual realm sky didn't dare to be careless in the face of these sword lights and quickly retreated. In an instant, Xueqi and the others had already disappeared into the boundless horizon. After a while, the battlefield returned to normal. By then, Xueqi and the others had already disappeared. The expressions of Chen Shi and the others became extremely unsightly when they saw this. They escaped. Xueqi had actually escaped. Chen Shi's expression was frighteningly gloomy. Once the fifth-dimensional treasure returned to the sword sect, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for them to obtain it again. Although the dual realm sky didn't fear the sword sect, it would be impossible to destroy the sword sect unless all the experts of the dual realm sky joined forces. But even if all the experts of the dual realm sky joined forces, there wasn't much hope of destroying the sword sect. Everyone's expressions were somewhat gloomy. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared beside Chen Shi. He looked into the distant horizon and said softly, "Once the sword sect obtains that treasure, then we—" Everyone's expressions became somewhat unsightly when they heard Yi Xian's words. A fifth-dimensional treasure. If the sword sect obtained that treasure, the consequences would be unimaginable. Chen Shi looked at Yi Xian. "Little friend, this thing isn't just a key to the fifth dimension?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course. This thing is extremely lethal. If they control it and use it with their strength, it would be very easy for them to destroy the dual realm sky." After a short moment of silence, Chen Shi suddenly said, "All of you should be clearly aware of the situation we're in right now. If we don't join forces, then we'll be utterly unable to resist the sword sect." At that moment, an old man nearby suddenly said, "Contact all the experts in the dual realm sky." Chen Shi nodded. "Senior Elder is right. We must unite all the experts in the dual realm sky." When he spoke up to here, he seemed to have thought of something, and then he looked at Yi Xian and said, "Young brother, you killed 2 members of the sword sect just now, so they'll definitely not let you off. So, why don't you stay here and resist the sword sect with us?" Everyone in the surroundings looked at Yi Xian when they heard this. Everyone regarded Yi Xian very highly. Because he had just killed 2 experts from the sword sect in an instant. Only with strength would one be respected. Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. "All right." Seeing that Yi Xian had agreed, Chen Shi smiled. "That's great." A short moment later, all of them turned around and left. Yi Xian glanced at the starry sky in the distance, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. However, he didn't speak. Xueqi was dashing madly with the pagoda at the end of the starry sky. What he wanted to do now was to take this precious treasure of the fifth dimension back to the sword sect. But at that moment, he suddenly stopped. He looked at the spatial ring in his hand and saw that it had suddenly exploded, and the world prison pagoda flew out. Xueqi's expression instantly changed. He grabbed the world prison pagoda, and countless sword intents and sword lights enveloped the world prison pagoda. The pagoda trembled violently while the sword intent grew more and more illusory. Xueqi was shocked when he witnessed this scene. He knew that the pagoda intended to flee. Xueqi was just about to attack again when a mysterious force suddenly surged out from within the pagoda. Bang! The sword intent instantly vanished without a trace. At the same time, Xueqi retreated explosively for almost 30 kilometers. When Xueqi stopped, the pagoda had vanished. Xueqi's mind instantly went blank when he witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, a strand of sword intent suddenly appeared in the distance. In the next moment, the sword intent vanished, and a middle-aged man appeared in front of Xueqi. The middle-aged man had shoulder-length hair, sword-like eyebrows, and starry eyes. His hands were hidden in wide sleeves, and he emanated a scholarly aura. Xueqi immediately returned to his senses when he saw this middle-aged man, and he bowed slightly. Junior uncle. This person was the sword sect's Li Chunfeng. This name wasn't very famous in the fourth dimension, but in the sword sect, he was extremely famous, and he was like a god. Li Chunfeng spoke softly. "Did something happen?" Xueqi nodded, and then he recounted what had just happened. After he finished, he was still slightly nervous because he was afraid that Li Chunfeng wouldn't believe him. Li Chunfeng spoke softly. "We were schemed against." Xueqi instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. Li Chunfeng believed him. Xueqi spoke in a low voice. "This thing's appearance and disappearance are too strange. Who exactly schemed against my sword sect?" Li Chunfeng shook his head. Let's not care about this for now. My sword sect has lost so many people this time. Let's settle this debt with them first. After he finished speaking, he transformed into a strand of sword intent and vanished into the horizon. He was heading towards the dual realm sky. Xueqi hesitated for a moment, and then he hurriedly followed. The dual realm sky. On this day, a strand of sword intent suddenly streaked across the horizon. This strand of sword intent slashed into the dual realm sky, and everything in its path was obliterated inch by inch. During this period, numerous experts within the dual realm sky hadn't even reacted before they were slashed into pieces by this strand of sword intent. The sword intent was unstoppable. Countless experts within the dual realm sky were shocked. Right at this moment, an enormous hand suddenly stretched out from the space in front of the strand of sword intent. This enormous hand directly grabbed the strand of sword intent. After a moment of silence, boom! The enormous hand suddenly shattered and turned into nothingness, but the strand of sword intent was still there. The strand of sword intent continued to fly as if it wanted to slice the dual realm sky into pieces. This sword was pointed at the dual realm sky. Right at this moment, a skinny old man suddenly appeared in front of this strand of sword intent. The skinny old man looked at this strand of sword intent with a calm expression. When the strand of sword intent arrived in front of him, he suddenly put his fingers together, and black light appeared on his fingertips. This finger directly touched the strand of sword intent. Boom! There was a sudden explosion, and the skinny old man instantly retreated nearly 100,000 feet. However, the strand of sword intent also stopped in its original spot. The sword intent suddenly dissipated, and a middle-aged man appeared in front of the old man. This person was Li Chunfeng. The skinny old man looked at Li Chunfeng, his eyes full of solemnity. Half-step to the mortal realm. Li Chunfeng was expressionless. You aren't too bad yourself. You can take a strike from me. The skinny old man said indifferently. If you want revenge, I'm afraid that's not enough. Li Chunfeng looked at the skinny old man. Want to give it a try? The skinny old man nodded. Give it a try. As soon as he finished speaking, the skinny old man suddenly vanished, and then a strand of black light flashed. At the instant the skinny old man vanished, Li Chunfeng stomped his right foot lightly, and then a strand of sword intent shot out from beneath his feet. Bang! The strand of black light in the distance was directly forced to stop on the spot. At the same time, Li Chunfeng vanished, and the strand of sword intent tore through the air. Rumble! As an explosion resounded through the air, the skinny old man instantly retreated explosively. As he retreated, a strand of sword light instantly arrived at the center of his brows. The skinny old man's pupils constricted abruptly, and then he swiftly pressed his palms together. This time, he directly blocked the sword light. However, the strand of sword intent instantly slashed apart his palms. The skinny old man was horrified in his heart, and his figure flashed to the side. Hiss! The skinny old man's figure flashed away, but his head was left on the spot. The old man's eyes opened wide, and they were filled with disbelief. He knew that this swordsman before him was very strong, but he hadn't imagined that this swordsman would be strong to this extent. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. In the darkness below, Yi Xian glanced at Li Chunfeng, then turned and ran. Soon, he completely disappeared. If he could win, then he would fight. If he couldn't, then he would run. Meanwhile, Li Chunfeng suddenly swept his gaze downwards, and a strand of sword intent spread out like a net towards the surroundings. He seemed to be searching for someone. After a short moment, his brows furrowed slightly, and he turned to look at Xueqi. That Yi Xian is still in this world? Xueqi said solemnly. He should be. Li Chunfeng nodded slightly. He once again scanned the area with his divine sense, but he still couldn't find Yi Xian. At that moment, Xueqi said solemnly, this fellow must have seen that the situation isn't good and fled. Li Chunfeng nodded slightly. It's all right. I'll settle the score with him in the future. After saying that, he looked around. Why? Is there no one else in the dual realm sky? As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand gently. In an instant, countless sword intents flew out and killed anyone they saw. In the dual realm sky, countless powerhouses hurriedly joined forces to resist. However, there were still people who were killed by these sword intents. In the darkness, Yuan Xiaodao, who was beside Zhu Xie, said softly, "The sword sect is serious." Zhu Xie said indifferently, "We've lost so many people. If we don't come for real, then we'll be stupid." Yuan Xiaodao smiled. "This person isn't just an ordinary kind of strong." Zhu Xie looked at Yuan Xiaodao. "Do you have a chance of winning?" Yuan Xiaodao shook his head. "This person's sword Dao attainment has already touched a trace of the mortal realm. I can't match him." Zhu Xie asked, "This dual realm sky," Yuan Xiaodao said softly, "don't underestimate this place. There are also real big shots here." As soon as Yuan Xiaodao finished speaking, an old man slowly walked over from the distant horizon. As this old man walked over, the sword intense in the dual realm sky suddenly stopped and slowly dissipated. Yuan Xiaodao looked at the old man. "He's here." In the air, Li Chunfeng also looked at the old man. The old man wore a simple blue robe and had a slight hunch on his back. He held a walking stick in his hand and walked slowly, coughing from time to time. Li Chunfeng looked at the old man and didn't say anything. The old man looked at Li Chunfeng with a complicated gaze. As expected of the most monstrous person in the sword sect in the past 1,000 years. The most monstrous person in the sword sect in the past 1,000 years. Chapter 8:17. A person who was about to die of old age. Everyone was looking at the old man who'd just appeared. Even some people in the dual realm sky were unfamiliar with the elder who had just appeared. Very few people had seen him before. The old man gazed at Li Chunfeng. "Although the sword sect is strong, it can't destroy the dual world sky. Even your master and senior brother can't do it." Li Chunfeng smiled. "Is that so?" The old man nodded. "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly opened his palm and clenched it lightly. At this instant, Li Chunfeng suddenly attacked with his sword. This attack was so swift that many people couldn't react in time. However, the surroundings returned to calm in an instant. At this moment, everyone's expressions became solemn. Because the battle was over. In the distance, Yuan Xiaodao's expression was extremely solemn. The old man's strength had exceeded his expectations. Seeking the Tao. Quote, in the distance, Li Chunfeng stared at the old man. "A decent one has finally arrived." As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his fingers together, and a ray of sword light suddenly slashed out from the tip of his finger. The ray of sword light was like a thread that was imperceptibly fine. In the distance, the old man suddenly opened his palm and clenched it tightly. Boom! The surrounding space suddenly trembled violently, and a light shattering sound resounded. In the next moment, the old man retreated explosively for an entire 3 kilometers. Li Chunfeng stood on the spot and didn't move. However, his expression was much more solemn than before. Because his sword had shattered. Both of them had seemed relaxed in that attack just now, but they'd actually used all their strength. He seemed to have the upper hand, but he actually hadn't gained any advantage. In the distance, the old man gazed at Li Chunfeng and said softly, "The younger generation will surpass us in time. Your sword sect is really full of talents." Li Chunfeng said indifferently, "Hand over Yi Xian." Yi Xian. Obviously, he knew that he couldn't destroy the dual world sky with his own strength. Thus, he had to settle for the next best thing and choose Yi Xian. His intuition told him that Yi Xian was the culprit. The old man shook his head. "Yi Xian doesn't have much to do with us. If you want him, go find him yourself." He wouldn't hand over Yi Xian because Yi Xian wasn't a pushover. It was already incredible that he was still alive. If the dual realm sky captured him to curry favor with the sword sect, he might be targeted by the people behind Yi Xian. The person behind Yi Xian was also very mysterious. It was still a mystery how strong the other party was. Li Chunfeng looked at the old man. "You must hand him over." The old man shook his head and smiled. Threatening the old man? "Sure, your sword sect can declare war on us." A wisp of sword light suddenly appeared on Li Chunfeng's fingertip. The old man's expression was calm, without a hint of fear. The two worlds realm was truly not afraid of the sword sect. The wisp of sword light on Li Chunfeng's fingertip grew brighter and the atmosphere became more and more tense. At this moment, an illusory middle-aged man appeared in the air. He wore a green robe and had a sword hanging from his waist. Seeing this person, the wisp of sword light on Li Chunfeng's fingertip quietly disappeared. He bowed slightly to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man in front of him was the sword sect leader, Mu Qingfeng. It wasn't his main body that had come. Mu Qingfeng looked at the old man below and smiled. So it's Grand Elder Chen. I didn't expect you to still be alive. Grand Elder Chen smiled. I'm just struggling at death's door. Mu Qingfeng smiled. I'm here today to demand an explanation. Grand Elder Chen looked at Mu Qingfeng. Your sword sect has already obtained that treasure. Do you still want an explanation? Mu Qingfeng shook his head. My sword sect didn't obtain that treasure. Grand Elder Chen frowned. Are you joking? Mu Qingfeng smiled. I don't like to joke. That treasure really isn't in my sword sect's hands. As he spoke, he looked at the nearby Jiang Qi. Jiang Qi told him about how they had escaped from the World Prison Pagoda. Hearing Jiang Qi's words, the expressions of the dual realm sky powerhouses turned ugly. They obviously didn't believe it. No one would believe it. Mu Qingfeng shook his head and smiled. I don't need you to believe it. Let that Yi Xian come out. I have a way to deal with him. Obviously, they suspected that Yi Xian was behind this. Yi Xian. Down below, Minister Chen was silent for a moment, and then he looked at Chen Shi not far away. Where is Yi Xian? At this moment, he also felt that something was off. Chen Shi shook his head. I don't know. Hearing this, Grand Elder Chen frowned slightly. At this moment, a voice came from the side. Senior, are you looking for me? Everyone looked over and saw that the person was Yi Xian. Yi Xian had appeared. Of course he had to appear because he knew that if he didn't, everyone would suspect him. That would be extremely disadvantageous to him. He couldn't withstand the sword sect and the dual realm sky targeting him. Seeing Yi Xian, Chen Shi nodded slightly. You don't need to worry. As long as that treasure isn't on you, no one can take you away in front of us. Yi Xian said, Thank you. Saying this, he looked at Mu Qingfeng in the air and smiled. I wonder why you're looking for me, sir? Mu Qingfeng sized up Yi Xian and nodded slightly. Everyone says that you're the most monstrous swordsman of the younger generation. I have to say that you're really not bad. Yi Xian smiled. Thank you for the compliment. Mu Qingfeng looked at Yi Xian. Everything that happened today was planned by you, right? Yi Xian smiled. Are you talking about the battle between the sword sect and the dual realm sky? Mu Qingfeng nodded. Yes. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Senior, you think too highly of me. Mu Qingfeng smiled. The sword sect's biggest mistake was underestimating you. Even a lion needs to go all out against a rabbit. That was my mistake. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, what you're trying to say is that the treasure is in my hands and I'm using it to sow discord between you and the dual realm sky, right? Mu Qingfeng looked at Yi Xian. Isn't that the case? Yi Xian asked in return. Where's the proof? Proof. The dual realm sky's powerhouses all looked at Mu Qingfeng. Mu Qingfeng looked at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian said with a smile. Actually, what I'm thinking is that your sword sect has already obtained that treasure, but all of you refuse to admit it. Not only do you refuse to admit it, you even want to make me, Yi Xian, take the blame. Because all of you don't want the people of the world to stare at all of you. If you make the people of the world focus their gazes on me, then your sword sect will be able to be extremely comfortable, right? Not far away. Grand Elder Chen narrowed his eyes slightly. He felt that what Yi Xian said made sense. In the air, Mu Qingfeng smiled. I have to say, your mouth is very sharp. Unfortunately, I won't reason with you or have any proof. As he spoke, a powerful sword will suddenly crush toward Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not hesitate and hid behind Grand Elder Chen. Grand Elder Chen looked coldly at Mu Qingfeng. He waved his right hand and a powerful force blocked Mu Qingfeng's sword will. However, it was clearly very strenuous for him, and his face was a little pale. In the air, Mu Qingfeng smiled. Is the dual realm sky going to protect him? Grand Elder Chen looked coldly at Mu Qingfeng. He's a member of the dual realm sky. Mu Qingfeng smiled. Very well. As he spoke, he pointed with his fingers. Wang. A ray of sword light shot down from the sky. Grand Elder Chen's expression changed. He suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist. After a moment of silence, he punched forward. A powerful force erupted from his fist like a volcano. Rumble! Grand Elder Chen's force exploded. Immediately after, Grand Elder Chen retreated frantically, retreating tens of thousands of feet away. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression darkened. Mu Qingfeng's strength was not just an ordinary level of strength. Mu Qingfeng looked coldly at Grand Elder Chen. He was about to attack again when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait!" Mu Qingfeng looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian stared at Mu Qingfeng. "I will take responsibility for my own actions. This matter has nothing to do with the dual realm sky. If you have anything to do with it, come at me." Hearing Yi Xian's words, the dual realm sky experts present looked at him with complicated expressions. Mu Qingfeng looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Sure." As he spoke, he suddenly pointed with his fingers. Wang. A ray of sword light flew down from the sky. Below, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he suddenly drew his sword. Immeasurable sword. Boom! As the sword slashed down, Yi Xian retreated immediately. Essence and blood sprayed from his mouth. However, after retreating a few dozen feet, his entire person disappeared. Completely disappeared. In the sky, Mu Qingfeng frowned slightly. He looked around, and his divine sense instantly covered a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. However, it was as if Yi Xian had evaporated from the world. Disappeared. Mu Qingfeng looked around again, but still did not find him. Below, Li Chenfeng said softly, "This person's concealment technique is quite incredible. And the sword technique he used just now is also extremely incredible. It's not simple at all." Mu Qingfeng nodded slightly. "We shouldn't underestimate him." "No, I should say that we didn't take him seriously enough." Li Chenfeng said, "Senior brother, please make the decision." Mu Qingfeng looked at the people in the dual realm sky. "All of you are really stupid. You were played like monkeys and you didn't know it. How sad." With that, he turned and left. Li Chenfeng looked at Grand Elder Chen and the others, then also turned and left. Soon, the three people from the sword sect disappeared from the dual realm sky. It was impossible for the three of them to destroy the dual realm sky. The experts in the dual realm sky weren't weak. If the sword sect wanted to destroy the dual realm sky, then they would have to pay an extremely heavy price. After Mu Qingfeng and the others left, Grand Elder Chen's expression was extremely gloomy. Meanwhile, Chen Shi said, "The sword sect is going too far." Grand Elder Chen said indifferently, "They have the ability to." Chen Shi said solemnly, "Grand Elder, what should we do now?" Grand Elder Chen fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "Investigate Yi Xian and see where he is." Chen Shi frowned slightly. "You don't believe him?" Grand Elder Chen shook his head. "Find him and help him in secret. Don't let him fall into the hands of the sword sect." When he spoke up to this point, he glanced coldly at the distant horizon. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The more the sword sect makes an enemy of Yi Xian, the more we have to be on good terms with him." Chapter 818. In the depths of a certain mountain, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, he was still in a state of emptiness. He did not dare to show himself. Once he showed himself, with the strength of the sword sect, it would not be difficult for them to find him. Thus, he could only maintain his state of emptiness. At this moment, his complexion was very bad because he had forcefully resisted Mu Qingfeng's sword. That sword had almost taken his life. Thinking of this, Yi Xian was speechless. He had just reached the creation realm and his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Then, his enemy had changed. The leader of the sword sect was definitely a peak expert in the fourth dimension. He was only at the creation realm. Why couldn't he wait until he reached the fate realm to meet such a person? Thinking of this, Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. "It's too difficult for me. It's too difficult for me." At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out in Yi Xian's mind. "It's still difficult for you? What did you do to the sword sect?" It was the voice of the 8th floor. Yi Xian was speechless.
Senior, you have to understand that they were the ones who came to mess with me first.
The 8th floor said softly, you said you would give this pagoda away. You went back on your words. Yi Xian was silent. His previous deal with the 8th floor was that he would give this pagoda away. After the other party had completely grasped this pagoda, the 8th floor would kill him. However, this pagoda was still in Yi Xian's hands. Yi Xian thought about it and said, Senior, how about I give this pagoda to you and you take it back to the 5th dimension?
The 8th floor said, Do you want me to die?
Yi Xian was confused.
Why?
The 8th floor sighed. I finally understand that this pagoda has already become one with you. Your karma coexists, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. With senior strength, your karma can completely snatch this pagoda away and bring it back to the 5th dimension, right? The 8th floor said, I felt the aura of a 5th dimension expert before, but it disappeared very quickly. If I'm not wrong, someone has taken care of it for you. If I snatch your pagoda, not only will I be targeted by the people behind you, I will also be targeted by the experts of the 5th dimension. I don't want to live like you. Yi Xian was speechless. He wanted benefits, but he didn't want to be targeted. He also wanted to.
Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and immediately asked, Senior, can you defeat those 2 swordsmen?
The 8th replied, What do you think? Yi Xian said, Why don't you go beat them up? I don't like them. The 8th person laughed and said, You're so funny. Do you think I'll go? Yi Xian said, Senior, are you from the 5th dimension?
The 8th person replied, Yes.
Yi Xian was silent. This 8th floor was truly an expert from the 5th dimension. Yi Xian asked again, Is the strength of the 5th dimension really much higher than that of the 4th dimension? The 8th person replied, The 5th dimension and the 4th dimension are slightly different. The biggest difference is the civilizations on both sides. To put it simply, the current 4th dimension is still pursuing the essence of power and martial arts. My 5th dimension is already pursuing the essence of life and the universe. At this point, he slightly paused and continued, Actually, the reason why the civilizations of the 5th dimension are so advanced is because of one person. That is the master of this pagoda, the Prophet. I greatly admire him. He is a person that countless experts of the 5th dimension admire because he researched all kinds of knowledge. He did not hide it and was willing to teach it to others. In the 5th dimension, he established no less than hundreds of thousands of academies. Unfortunately, after his disappearance, the original purpose of these academies has changed. They have become tools to fight for power. Academies? Yi Xian slightly frowned. What academies? The 8th person replied, 10,000 dimensional academies. There are hundreds of thousands of these academies. Apart from them, there is also the 10,000 dimensional academy. This academy was once a holy land in the hearts of everyone in the 5th dimension because of the Prophet. Prophet. Yi Xian was silent. He knew that the previous master of this pagoda was an existence that was highly respected in the 5th dimension. The 8th person continued, Before I disappeared, the 5th dimension was already in chaos. Especially because of that 10,000 dimensional library, the people of the 5th dimension fought like crazy. Because that library is really too important. You should rejoice. Rejoice that the people of the 4th dimension don't know the true use of this pagoda. Otherwise, they will spare no expense to kill you. Yi Xian lightly said, There is no difference. Because the people of the 5th dimension will definitely spare no expense to kill me. The 5th dimension. Thinking of this, Yi Xian sighed again. He had not even dealt with the people of the 4th dimension, but the enemies of the 5th dimension were already waiting for him. When would he be able to deal with them? At this moment, Yi Xian really felt tired. Along the way, because of this pagoda, he did not have a good night's sleep. And this kind of days would continue for a very long time. A tiring life. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. He continued to heal his injuries. With the spring of life, his injuries were quickly healed. After his injuries were healed, Yi Xian directly disappeared. At this moment, there were flying swords flying around the dual realm sky from time to time. The people of the sword sect. The current sword sect was openly looking for Yi Xian outside the dual realm sky. It could be said that they were showing off. Because this time, the sword sect had sent dozens of powerful swordsmen. And the one leading them was Li Chunfeng. The goal of the sword sect now was to find Yi Xian. In the dual realm sky, Yuan Xiaodao looked at the sword sect swordsman flying across the sky and softly said, "The sword sect is sure that the treasure is on him." Xueqi softly said, "It's me. I also suspect him. However, I have to say that he is a bit sinister. This time, the sword sect can be said to have suffered a great loss." Yuan Xiaodao shook his head and smiled. "Don't underestimate him. The people behind him are not simple." She still remembered the woman she met in the Nether Palace. That woman's strength. Even now, she still felt some fear when she thought about it. The more she interacted with Yi Xian, the more she realized that the people behind this guy were unfathomable. In fact, it was not just the people behind him. Yi Xian himself was a bit difficult to deal with. Apart from experts of Li Chunfeng's level, ordinary people in the sword sect could not pose any threat to him. Especially when Yi Xian was an expert in assassination. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared in front of the two women. It was Chen Shi. Chen Shi cupped his fists at Yuan Xiaodao. "Miss Yuan, Grand Elder Chen invites you." Yuan Xiaodao smiled. "The dual realm sky is going to join forces?" Chen Shi smiled. "Now that the sword sect has come to bully us, how can we not join forces?" Yuan Xiaodao thought about it and nodded. "Okay." Hearing this, Chen Shi smiled. With Yuan Xiaodao's participation, the dual realm sky would have an additional strength. Yuan Xiaodao turned to look at Xueqi and sent a voice transmission. "Don't let the temple interfere in this matter." Saying this, she turned and left with Chen Shi. Xueqi was silent for a moment, then turned and left. Yi Xian left the dual realm sky quietly. He did not dare to stay in the dual realm sky. If the sword sect found him, he would be finished. Outside the dual realm sky, Li Chunfeng sat cross-legged in the air with his eyes closed. A powerful sword intent was emitted from his body. At this moment, Jiang Qi suddenly appeared beside him. "Can't find him. Can't find him." Li Chunfeng opened his eyes. "He used all his strength?" Jiang Qi nodded. "This person seems to have vanished into thin air. There is no trace of him." Li Chunfeng was silent. Jiang Qi said, "His concealment technique," Li Chunfeng suddenly said, "to the black-yellow great world." Jiang Qi looked at Li Chunfeng. The latter was expressionless. "Isn't this person extremely loyal? Then let's go to the black-yellow great world. I believe he will come out, right?" Jiang Qi hesitated for a moment and said, "Such behavior is not something a swordsman should do." Li Chunfeng looked at Jiang Qi. "Then do you have a better idea?" Jiang Qi sighed. "Junior uncle, if we go against those people from the black-yellow great world, we will not be able to get over it." Li Chunfeng shook his head. "I don't want you to slaughter them. I just want to use them to force Yi Xian to come out. If he doesn't come out, everyone in the world will think that the fifth-dimensional treasure is in our sword sect's possession." Jiang Qi thought about it and nodded. Quote, "Fine." Quote, he knew that he couldn't allow Yi Xian to continue concealing himself like this. Because if Yi Xian didn't show himself, then the sword sect would really be unable to do anything to him. Moreover, it wouldn't do if Yi Xian continued developing like this. Because Yi Xian was too monstrous. If he was allowed to continue developing like this, then he would definitely be able to pose a threat to the sword sect. Jiang Qi was just about to leave when Li Chunfeng suddenly said, "I'll go with all of you." Jiang Qi gazed at Li Chunfeng, and the latter said in a light voice, "We can't underestimate him anymore. Let's go." Jiang Qi nodded. In next to no time, their group left the dual world sky and headed straight for the black-yellow great world. After Li Chunfeng and the others left, Xueqi appeared. She gazed silently at the direction that Li Chunfeng and the others had left, and then she took out a transmission stone. At the end of the starry sky, Yi Xian suddenly stopped and took out a transmission stone. After a short moment, his expression turned gloomy. The black-yellow great world. Yi Xian remained silent for a moment, and then he waved his right hand lightly and left his empty state. At the instant he left his empty state, Li Chunfeng suddenly stopped in another part of the starry sky, and he turned around. He's appeared. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the horizon. Jiang Qi and the others hurriedly chased after Li Chunfeng. After Yi Xian appeared in the distant starry sky, he turned around and looked into the distance. A powerful strand of sword intent was pressing towards him from that direction. He knew that the members of the sword sect had noticed him. Needless to say, their strength was truly terrifying. They'd noticed him as soon as he showed himself. What should I do? Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. He turned around and ran. He'd increased his speed to the limit. Fight. He definitely couldn't defeat them. Get help. Yi Xian's destination was the place he'd been to in the past, the Nether Pavilion. P.S. Your vacation is over. Congratulations. Congratulations. Chapter 8:19. Yi Xian raised his speed to the limit. Soon, he entered a black hole region, and as soon as he came out, a sword light appeared in the black hole region behind him. Seeing that, Yi Xian hurried to speed up. Behind him, a sword light chased closely, and the distance between them was closing at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian did not care about what was behind him. He continued to accelerate, and soon after passing through a dozen black hole regions, he arrived at the star region where the Nether Hall used to be. But at this moment, this star region had already been sealed. Yi Xian directly barged in. He rushed over with the executing heaven sword in hand, tearing apart everything in his path. When he neared the Nether Hall, a mysterious force suddenly enveloped him. The strength of this force caused Yi Xian's expression to change drastically. He knew that he could not stop this force, and he immediately said, "We're on the same side. We're on the same side." After a moment of silence, the mysterious force suddenly retreated like the tide. Seeing this, Yi Xian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Li Chunfeng had already appeared behind him. Yi Xian immediately ran, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Li Chunfeng frowned slightly. He was about to give chase when Jiang Qi appeared beside him. Jiang Qi looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid it's a trap." Li Chunfeng was silent. Yi Xian was not his match, but he did not dare to underestimate Yi Xian. He knew very well that many people often died because they underestimated their enemies. It was obvious that Yi Xian was planning to take him to this place. Jiang Qi said in a low voice, "Let's investigate first." Li Chunfeng shook his head. "It's not that there are no people in the four-dimensional universe who can kill me, but there are definitely more than a handful of them." As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly stomped his right foot, turned into a sword light, and disappeared into the distance. Jiang Qi hesitated for a moment, and then he took out a small sword. The small sword trembled slightly, turned into a sword light, and disappeared at the end of the horizon. Jiang Qi was silent for a moment, and then he followed. In the distance, Yi Xian arrived at the previous hall. Netherworld Hall. Yi Xian walked to the entrance of the main hall. He walked in front of the 11 statues. These statues were all women. He did not recognize them, nor did he know who they were. The reason he came here was actually to try his luck. At this moment, Li Chunfeng appeared behind Yi Xian. Li Chunfeng glanced at the Nether Palace and frowned. "Where is this?" Beside him, Jiang Qi shook his head. "I don't know." Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian with a hint of wariness in his eyes. He had the absolute strength to crush Yi Xian, but he didn't dare to be careless. Yi Xian walked to the statue of the woman in the cloth dress. He hesitated for a moment before asking softly, "Senior, are you there?" No response. Yi Xian was a little embarrassed. If he didn't come out, then he would be finished. He shouted again, but there was still no response. Yi Xian was silent. This wasn't going to be easy. At this moment, Li Chunfeng suddenly asked, "What are you doing?" Yi Xian turned to look at Li Chunfeng. "I have a question, and I hope you can answer it." Li Chunfeng said calmly, "What is it?" Yi Xian smiled. "Why do you not only want my pagoda, but also my life?" When the sword sect came to find him, he took the initiative to hand over the pagoda. However, the other party not only wanted his pagoda, but also his life. This was something he could not understand, because he did not have any deep hatred with the other party. Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian. "We do not have any deep hatred with you. We just want to exterminate you." "Exterminate you?" Yi Xian smiled. "I understand." Li Chunfeng glanced behind Yi Xian.
Where are your people?
Yi Xian was struck dumb.
Then he said, Who?
Li Chunfeng said calmly, You didn't lure me here to fight me one-on-one, right?
Yi Xian was silent for a moment, and then he said, I can't defeat you, but I want to have a fair battle with you.
Li Chunfeng suddenly spread open his palms again, and then he pressed down lightly. In next to no time, his cultivation was directly suppressed to the creation realm. Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian.
I want to see exactly how monstrous you are. Come.
Yi Xian nodded slightly.
He suddenly vanished, and in the next moment, a sword had arrived half an inch away from Li Chunfeng's forehead. However, right when this sword was about to stab into Li Chunfeng's forehead, it suddenly retreated like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, Yi Xian instantly retreated 300 m back. When he stopped, a drop of blood slowly dripped down from the space between his brows. Li Chunfeng's sword was faster than his. Yi Xian lightly touched the space between his brows, and in the next moment, he suddenly vanished.
Hiss! A speck of sword light arrived before the space between Li Chunfeng's brows. Li Chunfeng's face was expressionless.
A speck of cold light appeared on the tip of his finger, and in the blink of an eye, this speck of cold light had already appeared between Yi Xian's brows. Yi Xian chose to withdraw his sword once more, and he retreated 300 m back.
After he stopped, Yi Xian's face sank. Fast. Li Chunfeng's sword could only be described in one word. Fast. A single word that could suppress everything. In all the martial arts in the world, only speed was unbeatable. When your speed reached a certain level, you could really disregard everything. Yi Xian's sword was actually very fast as well, but when compared to Li Chunfeng, it was still quite a bit inferior. Li Chunfeng walked slowly towards Yi Xian and said in a light voice, I started practicing the sword at the age of 6, and from the age of 6, I swung my sword at least 10,000 times every day for a few decades. After that, I spent the first half of my life pursuing the speed of the sword. Up until now, I've never seen anyone's sword be faster than mine. Even my senior brother's sword is inferior to mine in terms of speed. Yi Xian nodded. Your sword is fast. Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian.
No, I can be even faster. As his voice fell, he suddenly vanished, and a ray of sword light flashed through the field. This ray of sword light was so fast that it could not be seen by the naked eye. Not far away, Yi Xian suddenly closed his eyes, and he stabbed forward with his sword in his left hand. Boom! This stab directly stabbed the ray of sword light, and the sword light shattered. The two swords were pointed at each other. A trace of surprise flashed through Li Chunfeng's eyes. He had not expected that Yi Xian would be able to withstand this strike of his. It was slightly beyond his expectations. Li Chunfeng said softly, You! He'd only just spoken up to hear when Yi Xian's sword suddenly moved slightly to the side, and then it stabbed forward towards Li Chunfeng's throat. Li Chunfeng didn't dodge, nor did he defend. He stabbed his sword towards Yi Xian's throat instead. Because his sword was faster than Yi Xian's, he was confident that his sword would be able to end Yi Xian before Yi Xian's sword could stab him. Confidence. This time, Yi Xian didn't stop. Li Chunfeng's sword stabbed directly at Yi Xian's throat. At practically the exact same moment, Yi Xian's sword stabbed at Li Chunfeng's throat as well. However, Li Chunfeng had just stabbed half an inch into Yi Xian's throat when Li Chunfeng vanished on the spot, and when he appeared again, he was already 3 kilometers away. Yi Xian stood on the spot, and fresh blood was flowing from his throat. His physical body was still unable to withstand Li Chunfeng's sword. However, Li Chunfeng's sword wasn't able to kill him either because Li Chunfeng had withdrawn his sword at the critical moment. If he didn't withdraw his sword, then even if Yi Xian didn't die, his physical body would be gone. Of course, Li Chunfeng would die as well because he held the celestial sword in his hand. No matter how formidable Li Chunfeng was, he would die without a doubt if he was struck by the executing heaven sword. The reason Yi Xian did this was because he knew that if they really fought, he would absolutely not be a match for Li Chunfeng. Since he wasn't a match for Li Chunfeng, then he might as well exchange a life for a life. In that instant just now, he was really prepared to die. Yi Xian didn't want to die, but he wasn't afraid of death. Risking his life? He had never been afraid. Opposite Yi Xian, Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian. I underestimated your courage.
He didn't expect that Yi Xian would actually exchange a life for a life with him. He naturally wouldn't exchange a life for a life with Yi Xian, because he would suffer a loss. One had to know that as long as he recovered his realm, he could easily kill Yi Xian. However, in that exchange just now, because he retreated, it could be said that he had lost by half a point. Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian. You are indeed a monster. The second affirmation. Jiang Qi, who was beside Li Chunfeng, was somewhat shocked. This Yi Xian actually made Li Chunfeng praise him twice. One had to know that in the sword sect, Li Chunfeng had basically never praised anyone. He had even said that there was no one in the current younger generation of the sword sect. But now, he had actually praised Yi Xian twice. At this moment, Li Chunfeng said, if you are willing to hand over that fifth-dimensional treasure, I am willing to bring you into the sword sect and let you become the next young sect leader of my sword sect. Young sect leader. Hearing Li Chunfeng's words, Jiang Qi was slightly startled. Let Yi Xian join the sword sect? What kind of operation was this? In the distance, Yi Xian smiled slightly. Do you really think that the treasure is on me? Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian. Are you still going to pretend to be crazy? That treasure has already recognized you as its master. Only you have the ability to make it cooperate with you, right? Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. It really isn't on me. This was something he couldn't admit even if he was beaten to death. Because once he admitted it, then his enemy wouldn't just be the sword sect, but also the dual realm sky. Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian without saying anything, but his aura suddenly soared. After a moment, he had completely recovered his realm. Yi Xian said in a low voice, was it an unfair fight? Li Chunfeng shook his head. I don't want to waste time with you. Regardless of whether that treasure is on you or not, you can't keep it. Once a person like Yi Xian grew up, he would definitely become a great threat to the sword sect in the future. Thinking of this, the murderous intent in Li Chunfeng's eyes intensified. He opened his palm, and a wisp of sword light flickered in his palm. As this wisp of sword light appeared, a powerful sword intent swept towards Yi Xian. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, he was prepared to fight with his life on the line. It should be said that he had no choice but to fight with his life on the line. His greatest trump card was the 6 Paths of Truth. No. There was still another extremely powerful trump card. In the distance, Li Chunfeng looked at Yi Xian. The wisp of sword light in his palm suddenly trembled violently, and the surrounding space began to crack like a spider web. It was extremely frightening. After a moment of silence, the wisp of sword light in Li Chunfeng's hand suddenly flew out. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Come on, play with your life. As soon as his voice fell, boom! In an instant, the sky was a sea of blood. This time, he no longer suppressed his bloodline. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.